Good afternoon. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Ms. Alford, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Cindy Bass.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Looking forward to today's hearing.
Thank you. Councilmember Kendra Brooks.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, colleagues, and presenters today.
Thank you. Councilmember Jamie Gaudier.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues and everyone. Happy to be here today.
Thank you. Councilmember Derek Green.
Good afternoon, Councilmember KGR and Chair. Thank you for bringing together this hearing this afternoon. Look forward to the conversation and the deliberations.
Thank you. And Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
I'm here. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing of the Committee on the Environment regarding resolution number 200431. Ms. Alford, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 200431, authorizing the Committee on the Environment to conduct hearings to investigate challenges and solutions to street litter and waste disposal systems in the wake of COVID-19 in the city of Philadelphia.
Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I am truly very excited about this conversation. Following the challenges over the summer, the budget constraints we are facing, as well as the impacts we are already seeing from climate change, I wanted to convene a conversation around how we continue to prioritize our zero waste goals in the wake of COVID-19. I also want us to think creatively about how we can use sustainable waste management to drive economic growth, business development, and job creation. That's why I've identified two subsections of focus for this hearing: incentivizing a circular economy and managing organics. Witnesses joining us together have a lot of expertise to offer, both on what we are currently doing in these areas, as well as what other cities have done and how we can learn from their best practices. It is my hope that this will be a positive conversation focused on solutions. Let me repeat. It is my hope that this will be a positive conversation focused on solutions for waste management that will help us create a climate resilient, healthy, and economically vibrant city in the wake of COVID-19. And with that, I wanted to pause to recognize any of my colleagues that may have any opening remarks. Okay, seeing none, Ms. Alford, will you please call the first panel or witness we have to testify this afternoon on resolution number 200431?
Yes. Commissioner Carlton Williams, Scott McGrath, Kyle Lewis, and Phil Bresby.
Excellent. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Welcome, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Councilperson Gilmore Richardson. Good afternoon, Chairperson Gilmore Richardson and members of the Committee on the Environment. My name is Carlton Williams, Commissioner of the Streets Department. I'm here to offer the following testimony on Resolution 200431, introduced by Chairperson Gilmore Richardson. I'm joined today by Streets Environmental Planning Director for Sanitation, Scott McGrath, and Streets Recycling Program Director, Kyle Lewis. Thank you for this opportunity to join you in discussing the challenges and solutions to street litter and waste disposal in the wake of COVID-19. Like most sanitation departments across the nation, our Sanitation Division has experienced significant impacts related to COVID-19, most notably a 30% increase in curbside trash collections. The added tonnage, staffing, and attendance challenges, along with incidents of severe weather, created the perfect storm for sanitation operations. The increased tonnage contributed to delays in collections. To put the 30% average increase tonnage into perspective, a 25% increase in tonnage requires at minimum an additional day's collection each week. To address the challenges, the department has implemented its plan to add 150 temporary laborers to assist with the unprecedented increase in trash tonnage, which has helped stabilize collections and return operations to a path towards normal collections. The department has also launched Up PHL as a new tool for the public to monitor the status of collections. In addition to this tool's use by the public, Up PHL brings together GPS tracking and route management functions that help the Sanitation Division more efficiently manage its resources. The new tool aids in facilitating route optimization to reduce fuel consumption and emissions. The Sanitation Division also has been coordinating with the Sustainability Office and the Parks and Recreation Department on initiatives started under the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, such as the Commercial Waste Tracking System, the Municipal Building Waste Audit Program, the Community Compost Network, and Urban Composting Permit and Pilot, and supports technical assistance to 10 to 15 businesses citywide to implement food waste reduction strategies. The department is also working to continue to support subcommittees such as enforcement and short dumping and waste reduction. Illegal dumping continues to be a major challenge across the city, for which the department deploys a significant number of resources to address. The department continues to use monitor cameras in heavily dumped areas and dispatches our short dump crews to capture the mounds of tires, construction debris, and trash dumped on streets and in underutilized or less trafficked areas. We are looking to continue our work with the Philadelphia Police Department's Environmental Crime Unit to address repeat dumping and ask residents to continue to be vigilant. If you see dumping in the act, call 911. After the fact, 311. Beyond these tips, the Sanitation Division has created several new steps to improve operations and gain a better understanding of the waste stream so that we can better utilize our resources to reduce and manage the trash we collect in ways that minimize the need for disposal in landfill or resource recovery facility. At this point, I will ask our Recycling Director and Environmental Planning Director to provide a more detailed overview of the Sanitation Division's efforts to operationalize the city's zero waste goals. Scott.
Yes, good morning, or I should say good afternoon, council members. My name is Scott McGrath, Environmental Planning Director, Streets Department Sanitation Division. Over the summer, the department has been working with its contractors to expand services to its sanitation convenience centers. In addition to accepting electronics, we've added CFL lights, batteries, fluorescent lights also. We've also been working closely with the Department of Environmental Protection to get our household hazardous waste program re-permitted, which we were successful at doing this. The first event was at 63rd Street back in September, and we have another series of events on October 23rd and 24th up at State Road in Ashburner in the northeast section of the city. The department is also working with Waste Management on the utilization of a provision in our disposal contract to separate and recover food waste from our waste stream. This month, the Sanitation Division Consultant, Mid-Atlantic Waste Consultants, or MSW, began a comprehensive assessment of waste collection and management practices. In November, MSW will be starting a waste composition analysis of our trash, which will involve sampling loads and separating the samples into over 40 categories. MSW will also be conducting a similar analysis of our curbside recycling. This data will assist in helping the division develop and adjust strategies to manage our waste stream as it's changed as a result of COVID-19, and to minimize the amount of waste that is sent for disposal in landfills or resource recovery facilities. The department's consultant will be doing an assessment that is wide-ranging and will be including a benchmarking of what other cities are doing, the department's regulations and operational policies, field operations, a cost analysis of our operations, they'll also be conducting an operational and policy analysis and looking at waste management alternatives. This work has already started and will take about 6 months to complete. The department will share the results of the study with City Council and staff as we proceed. Our consultant is also here today, who will be presenting some testimony after Kyle Lewis speaks.
Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Kyle Lewis. I'm the Recycling Program Director, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on resolution number 200431, addressing the challenges and solutions to street litter and waste disposal in the wake of COVID-19. This is in the shadow of the 2018 and 2019 repercussions of the China Sword recycling policy. And so with all of this in mind, we share both your environmental and your public impact concerns. After negotiating a best value contract for recycling in May of 2019, we returned 100% of citywide recycling collected to processing at the Waste Management Materials Recovery Facility, or MRF. With the primary goal of reducing the amount of contamination in the recycling system, we, recycling and waste management staff, regularly visited each sanitation district, receiving feedback and sharing training information with crews and drivers as they embarked on their routes. We also instituted monthly recycling trainings for key staff, and recycling ticketing for violations was suspended, and our focus was on increased staff training and public education. When COVID-19 hit, we were faced with whether to continue, suspend, or alter recycling collections, since the priority was collecting an extra day or more of trash set-outs to mitigate odors, vermin, insects, litter conditions, and adverse health effects. We continued recycling, but we found that capturing the increased tonnage in all areas of the city each week, combined with bad weather, led to commingling of trash and recycling in areas that were short-staffed. New York City and DC experienced similar challenges. Baltimore suspended their recycling altogether in late August through November. Many smaller municipalities, estimated by the Solid Waste Association of North America at 50 to 60 municipalities, they've cut their recycling programs altogether. In an effort to reduce the amount of waste set out at the curb, the Streets Department has launched a public education campaign entitled Curb Your Waste, to provide a roadmap, to help residents reduce their waste generation. City Council has received a copy of the one-page document, and that information was made into a postcard that was sent out to over 425 city residents over the past couple of weeks. Some of you may have received it. Source reduction is the #1 tool in the EPA's waste management hierarchy. Tips like use your garbage disposal or compost to reduce food waste, when heated en masse, can have a major impact on reducing the weight and volume of trash receptacles that our crews have to manage. Setting out the proper amount and types of materials in the proper containment can go a long way in improving collection times to mitigate excessive overtime, burnout, and cut down on injuries. We also expanded expanded the operating hours and days of the department's sanitation convenience centers, and participated with OIT's Pitch and Pilot program, resulting in a pilot with a company that collects textiles and electronics from residential properties on coal. The department has received a grant from the Recycling Partnership, funded by Closed Loop Partners, to investigate a variety of strategies for messaging and delivery to residents to reduce recycling contamination. We're also working on adding electric charging stations at more of our facilities to increase our fleet of electric vehicles, and recently purchased compactor trucks powered by compressed natural gas. The Streets Department continues to pursue clean, efficient fuel alternatives in tests and trials as new climate adaptive fuel alternatives come to market. Sorry about that. Our municipal solid waste efforts are focused on efficiency and waste reduction, while recycling engages to reduce contamination. These efforts combine to make a more environmentally and worker-friendly operation. The solutions to proper waste management are long-term and must involve the collective we. We all want clean air and water. We thank the residents of Philadelphia for their patience during this time, and we thank you all for the concerns as we progress through and beyond this crisis to a more sustainable city. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today. We have Phil Brzee, our consultant, here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Phil?
Good afternoon, Chairperson Gilmore Richardson and members of the Committee on the Environment. My name is Phil Brzee, and I'm a senior consultant for MSW Consultants, and I do appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today on Resolution 200431. To start, I'd also like to disclose that I was the City of Philadelphia's recycling director for 4 years up until April 2016. And in that role, I did get to meet and interact with a number of committee members and their staffs, as well as fellow panelists. And I remain, immensely proud of my service in Philadelphia and the relationships that I was able to forge with city leaders, staff, and stakeholders alike. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So as Scott McGrath noted earlier, MSW Consultants has been engaged by the Streets Department to perform a number of projects. These include a waste composition study of both the residential trash and recyclable streams. The data gleaned from this study will help form a better understanding of the makeup of Philadelphia's residential solid waste and how it has changed with COVID-19. We'll also be able to compare this data with the previous study completed in 2017 and gauge how the trash and recycling streams have changed, not just since COVID, but also since the recycling market disruptions that took root across the U.S. in 2018. Finally, this upcoming study will allow the city to establish baselines which the city can use to measure the impacts of planned recycling public education initiatives. So more specific to today's discussions, we are also at the beginning stages of a comprehensive evaluation of the sanitation's operations and programs. MSW Consultants is a national leader in helping cities optimize their municipal solid waste collection programs. Our evaluation process focuses on a very quantitative, data-driven approach to measure operational and financial performance so that operations managers and elected officials can understand and correct any deficiencies in the system. Among the issues we'll be examining are the city's routing system, city code, sanitation regulations, and operational policies, the division's organization, fleet management, and cost of services. The research and operational reviews will be followed up by analyses of alternatives, some of which may fit within the existing system framework and some that may require different approaches. This effort will include research and benchmarking Philadelphia against other large cities. Indeed, one of the first deliverables will be a comparison of how COVID-19 has impacted the benchmark cities and how they have responded. And it's on that last point I would like to reiterate that Philadelphia's solid waste and recycling system is not alone as it manages under COVID-19. As a consulting firm with public sector clients across the U.S., we are familiar with those impacts, which of course include increased residential trash volumes, decreased commercial volumes, recycling program suspensions, and increased risk to sanitation workers who even prior to COVID-19 performed the fifth most dangerous occupation according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So again, we appreciate this opportunity to work with the Streets Department and the city, and this concludes my testimony, and I'll be happy to answer questions from the committee when the time arises. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your testimony, and I just wanted to go back to offer my thanks and kudos to Commissioner Williams, to Mr. McGrath, to Ms. Lewis, who is very busy working hard for the city. We heard that phone ringing, and I wanted to tell you I do have my postcard. I received it in the mail, 10 tips on how to curb your waste from the Streets Department. So we're asking all residents and community members to look out for that. But I wanted to thank you all so much for the work that you all have been doing. I had the opportunity to visit with a sanitation crew in the Kensington area earlier this summer. It was a very hot day. I was on the entire route for 3 hours, and I just want to commend you all for how you have been able to rise to the occasion and step up to the challenges that we have faced, not only since 2019, but in the wake of COVID-19. And I don't know that we could have ever imagined where we were in the summer. So I just want to thank you publicly for how you all have stood up to the challenge and really helped us to face this issue. I just have a few quick questions that I wanted to get on the record, and then I'll recognize other members of the committee as indicated in the chat. Now that you are adopting work that was previously led by the Zero Waste Cabinet, what resources do you think are necessary in order to ensure that work continues to grow?
Thanks you for your kind words. First of all, Council Member Richardson, certainly is a pleasure, and I'm glad you had the opportunity to experience firsthand what our workers go through in dealing with waste each and every day. And so this resolution is certainly very timely when it comes down to addressing waste. And I think COVID-19 has taught us that it's time to take a new look on how products are generated and how they're disposed of, and to make sure that we get the maximum of usage out of every product that is created. With that being said, we've adopted much of the zero waste plan in our existing departments. It was already established by using the collaboration of a number of departments, streets being kind of the anchor of those departments, but certainly the Office of Environmental Sustainability, which also sits under Otis, and Christine Knapp is on the phone with us today. Parks and Recreation, that was noted. Catherine is also on the phone with us today in the hearing with us. So I think the structure of the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet continues. We used in-house resources to get things done, like the litter index across the city of Philadelphia. Certainly we worked closely with other departments, and we will continue to do so. For example, Mr. McGrath mentioned earlier today, our vision to try to bring composting citywide here in the city of Philadelphia is going to require the coordination between multiple departments, specifically water department. So I think we have the structure in place to carry out the foundation. I think the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, when it was in its formation, laid the foundation for us to actually implement many of the initiatives that were established.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Commissioner. And very quickly, before I go to my next question, I just want to recognize the presence of our council member, Helen Gim, also a member of the Committee on Environment. Thank you so much, Council Member Gim, for joining us. I'll now go back to my next question. I'm really excited about the new Up PHL feature. How will this new tool help you modernize collections? And will there be other features of this tool to help residents with properly setting out trash and recycling?
Okay, and I put just a part of it about, I'm thinking you're referring to Up PHL? Okay, great.
Yes, PHL.
Yeah, so we've been working, it's a platform that we started actually before COVID-19, and COVID-19 actually made it certainly a very usable tool now more than ever. But we want to be able to give the public updated information in real time without having them have to wonder or guess or call 311. And I think when we had the crisis, 311 was inundated with over 3,500 phone calls at its peak for related to miscollections. I think if people had this tool, and Council Member Gautier can certainly attest to it, because that was one of her biggest concerns, is that people didn't know when our trash and what type of schedule they were on. But this tool gives them a real-time snapshot of where the trucks are in any given day. So if we're a day behind in certain neighborhoods, the challenge for us was some days we would be up in certain areas, some days we'll be a day behind, some days we'll be 3 days behind, and people just didn't know. But this tool actually allows you to pinpoint the location, time, and where those trucks are actually working, so people have a general understanding on what day they're working on and how long it would take to get them so they can manage their trash collection. That was big for us to be able to launch that. COVID-19 helped us speed it up. We had hoped to get it up before that, but technology, as you know, technology can sometimes be challenging, especially when you're working across multiple systems. So we're happy that tool does that for the public. For us, there's some back-end data that it also does. We don't show this publicly. However, you can look at the number of trucks that you deploy, the time that they are dispatched, the time that they're en route, how long it takes to get on a route completed, how long it takes to go to and from a transfer station, and ultimately how long it takes to end their day. This helps us tremendously in terms of managers. That data is usually given by word of mouth or through manual systems, which means handwritten documents and notes. Now we're eliminating all that, where all of that information is then uploaded into a system, and we can track it. And we can monitor it over periods of time to make sure that we can do route adjustments and do route optimization in-house. A system like that will probably cost a couple of $100,000s. I'm sure Phil Brzee and Scott McGrath can tell you that if we brought in an outside consultant to do that, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to implement that type of system. However, we were able to do it with in-house staff. Certainly want to give a big shout out to OIT because they designed and built the system along with the other platforms of Pay PHL and Permit PHL. But it does so much more and help us manage our department in real time. Things that we used to have to do manually, we no longer have to do. We can go onto the computer site, go down by truck, and look at the routes, look at the timing on the routes, and make sure that the trash is done as efficiently and effectively as possible.
That is tremendous. And I think, that gives us an opportunity to really operationalize efficiency in city government. So I just want to thank you for that work. I'm really excited about that. I have one last question before I recognize our Vice Chair, Councilmember Bass, for her question. But you mentioned in one of your testimony, you mentioned illegal dumping, especially in communities of color. It continues to be a significant problem. In addition to the enforcement provisions, are there any other recommendations you have that council could take up to reduce short dumping? I mean, I know this is something that my office has received a ton of calls about over the last several months, and I do want to thank you all publicly for always responding to the call. I just truly appreciate the partnership. But what advice or recommendations would you give us around this short dumping issue? Because it has been a significant problem and an uptick in short dumping in our communities.
Thank you, Council Member Richardson. Yes, illegal dumping, especially during the COVID-19 epidemic, exacerbated tremendously. We're still challenged with trying to keep up with it today. Unfortunately, it's a learned behavior in which some residents actually think it's okay to dump on locations other than in front of their home. And the problem becomes even larger, magnified, when it sits for a couple of days and we're not able to get to it. That complicates also matters when you have their residential short dumping, and then you have commercial short dumping, where contractors come into the city and find desolate areas to dump their debris. So between the combination of two, we have to start beginning to change the culture. The only effective tool that we have right now that I think that is important to implement and actually expand is enforcement using cameras. We need to monitor those locations. Those cameras, I had a meeting just the other day with the city of Los Angeles, who actually called us to say, hey, what are you guys doing about illegal dumping? We're having a major problem. So all the way across of Los Angeles, we shared with them the technology, and they were amazed that the city of Philadelphia is using cameras that the police department is using to address this matter. Now, we would like to obviously expand those to much larger areas and rotate them. Dumpers get smart. They understand that when they're monitored, they can find other locations that are not. And so that's the challenge of keeping up with them. But I'm happy to report that the locations that we place cameras, we saw a significant reduction in the amount of illegal dumping in those areas. For residents, of course, obviously, we try to do that to catch contractors and those who come in with tons and tons of material. But there also is another component of trying to change the behavior of residents who think it's okay to put it on a corner. And if you go down areas like, 52nd and Locust, if you go down in areas in North Philadelphia, if you go down areas in parts of Germantown under bridges, that's a lot of residential trash that people think that, okay, it's not in front of my door, so I don't have to worry about it. But the environmental impact it's having on the community and the neighborhood, especially people who live in close proximity and businesses, is detrimental to us all. So I think it's very important that we have an educational campaign along with an enforcement campaign to try to change the mindset of individuals who don't understand why this behavior should not be tolerated.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to recognize our Vice Chair, Councilmember Cindy Bass.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone. And a special good afternoon to our Commissioner Carlton Williams, who we work with very, very closely as a district council person. I think I call the commissioner every day, probably several times a day, as we work to get in front of the mounds and mounds of trash that we have throughout our district. And, I know that resources are tight, and COVID has really put some strain on your workforce. One of the things that was a little frustrating for me is that, while we were thanking everyone who was a first responder and also, an essential worker during COVID, it seems like a lot of our sanitation workers were left behind or left out of that conversation. And people really didn't want to recognize it. Was really just more like, well, when is my trash getting picked up? It's been out here for 3 days or 4 days or a week or whatever. And we were really trying to let people know that, listen, COVID has had an effect on the streets department as well. And so we all need to be patient. We all need to just recognize that these are essential workers who deserve respect and who deserve, a big shout out and a big thank you as well. So I just, first of all, wanted to say that. I was really excited to hear about the program that you discussed that would allow people to see where the trash collection system is in their community. And I have to say, somehow I missed that. So I thank you for, bringing that back to our attention, because that's something I definitely want to spread the word out to my constituents about as a district council person. I also wanted to talk just briefly about just a couple of things. The first is around a public awareness campaign around dumping you just mentioned. And I wanted to really encourage that because I think in a lot of our neighborhoods, dumping has become just so commonplace and just so accepted that people don't think twice about walking by a big old pile of trash. They see it, but they don't see it. And so there's something, there's something wrong with that, but I think there are things we can do about it. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what a public awareness campaign would look like around dumping and reporting it. And particularly in neighborhoods where there's the sort of like a no snitch culture. If you could talk about that, and if there could be, I think, a reward system put in place where if you see someone dumping, maybe you might be able to collect a reward if you were able to provide information that would lead to the arrest or fining or whatever of someone who dumped. That when they pay their fine, on the other end of that fine could be the person who reported the information, just to really incentivize something like that. So I just wanted you to talk just a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you, Councilmember Bass. It's always a pleasure working with your office to address some of these challenges. I know that they're very near and dear to your heart as well. On the impact of education, what COVID-19 actually did this year, and which was a huge, huge impact to why we're seeing so much dumping around. Many people weren't allowed to do neighborhood cleanups and corridor cleanups. Those groups and those volunteers play such a huge role in our ability to keep dumping down. And when it stopped, I think what you saw is the impact of the absence of our very, very valued volunteers, especially our block captains, our commercial corridor cleaning programs in your district around Germantown and Shelton, along Germantown Avenue and Wayne Avenue. All of those things were extremely important because the residents take ownership and responsibility of the community and work with government and just don't place the whole burden on government to try to keep up with it. Because in reality, council member, and you know this, we don't have enough resources to keep up with the amount of dumping around the city. We rely heavily on volunteer support and participation and community engagement. So I think any type of program that can incentivize residents to partner with the streets department to keep areas clean, to beautify our neighborhoods, to become block captains, those are the key tools that when things are successful, you go into neighborhoods throughout the city of Philadelphia, when you have a strong network of committed neighbors, individuals, block captains, and businesses, you see less problems with illegal dumping. And if you add in cameras to hotspot areas, we certainly can make a dent in this problem.
Okay, very good, very good. Question, can you highlight the resources that are available to constituents? I know there's obviously, recycle bins and in some neighborhoods, I think there's trash cans. Can you talk about that? If someone needs, trash cans, do you still do rain barrels? And have you thought about things that might be a little bit out of the box, but for residents who are willing to have them installed, like garbage disposals, which I heard one of your folks say take a huge amount of waste out of the system?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we actually piloted a garbage disposal program that businesses would give a very reduced rate to have it installed and to see if it reduced the amount of food waste in that area. And we ran a pilot next to a block that didn't have disposals. And we did see a significant reduction in the amount of food waste as was studied if they install a garbage disposal system in their home. Especially in areas where their residents are economically challenged. We wanted to make it affordable for them to do that because it actually helps reduce waste, and food waste obviously was the number one problem that we experienced with the vermin and the flies and all the things that our residents complained about. If we're able to implement a program like that again, that would certainly be great. Scott McGrath actually worked with me on that program some years ago. It's almost, a decade ago, but it was certainly an important program. I think in council passed legislation that all new construction obviously would have to require it, but we're talking about our older residential neighborhoods that were not built in a new age that won't have it, that we need to make it affordable for them to be able to get it. So I think programs like that were very important. We also piloted 2 years ago Philican, which in certain areas of the city allowed residents to get a trash can and have a uniform trash can put out on their block to reduce the amount of trash and how people set out trash. Many people ask, well, what's the difference between the city and the suburbs? I said, well, there's a couple of things. The regulations are very different. In the suburb areas where they have private collection, they don't allow things to be set out outside of a bin. Everything has to be in a bin, and anything outside of that bin has to be paid for. So when you look at what our regulations are versus what the suburban areas are with private collection, that's a very big difference. How trash is set out, what type of bags they use. I think yesterday in the council hearing with Councilmember Parker, you heard one of our sanitation employees testify how people just throw trash out any kind of way. That contributes to the litter problems in the city of Philadelphia. The type of bags they use, containers, lids, all of those things also help greatly reduce litter in our communities and neighborhoods. So I think we need a comprehensive effort to be able to implement many of those things to start attacking our litter problem from illegal dumping on down to every little piece of litter that we see on our streets.
Even though we have a budget crunch, I know, are any of these programs likely to come back with providing trash cans and providing garbage disposals in light of the importance of the environment and, the global warming it's not slowing down, it's speeding up. So are we bringing any of these programs back?
So I think the good news is that we were able to utilize grant funding, and Scott McGrath can talk to that, from our State Act grant our 902 grant, and Kyle also can both talk to this. So we didn't use city resources, general fund resources. We actually used the funds that were generated through our increased recycling through the state. And that allows us to do programs like educational programs for illegal dumping. It allows us to pilot programs like trash cans. We purchase Big Bellies using those grants. I mean, those are the type of important subsidies that we get from the state that allows us to continue. I don't know what the impact of COVID-19 is going to be on those funds. I'm sure that, like the city of Philadelphia, the state is also challenged, fiscally challenged. And we are hoping that we still get our fair share of what those grant dollars, which usually is about $1.2 to $1.5 million a year. We still want to use those grant dollars to invest in initiatives like this so that we can control and reduce dumping. We can buy cameras with those funds. We can do so many different things. So I think we're still going to continue it. Hopefully we'll still get the allotment that the city of Philadelphia deserves and to be able to continue those investments. The final thing is we still want more block captains. We're always going to give bag, broom, and gloves to our block captains. We're still going to make sure that they're supported. Again, they are the backbone of our system in the city of Philadelphia for outreach to our neighborhoods. So we will make sure somehow, some way, we will make sure we fund enough bags, brooms, and gloves to continue our clean block program.
Very good, very good. And last question, can you speak briefly about composting? Several years ago, I actually did a hearing on composting and the need for composting throughout the city of Philadelphia. And we had Bennett Compost, who came in and brought everyone buckets. And I'm not sure how many people actually, took advantage of that. But, for many, many moons after that, I was composting. And I only stopped because I lost my bucket and I have to get another bucket. But is that something that the city could do? Because the problem with composting through a service like that, which, they do a great job, but the problem is that there is a fee associated with being, helpful to the environment. And so everybody cannot afford to pay to compost. Right. And especially in a city like Philadelphia, there are a lot of folks who want to compost and who want to do what's best for the city, best for the environment. But being able to do it, and it be economically feasible, that's something that's very important.
Absolutely. So I think one of the initiatives of the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet was to start a pilot program in neighborhoods where people could do backyard composting and then composting at local community locations and areas. We wanted a comprehensive program in the city of Philadelphia, we being the streets department. So we wrote in a provision to our current waste contract with the city of Philadelphia that a portion of the waste could be piloted to actually be transitioned into some organic material that's reusable. And we wanted, the biggest challenge for us in a citywide program is that if we were to source separate it, it would cost a tremendous amount of resources to set up the infrastructure to do so. That means, just like recycling, we would have to have specific trucks to be able to do that outside of the existing trucks that we currently have.
What would that cost be? What would that give us a ballpark range? So
if we was to do a citywide, it would be millions of dollars. Trucks alone is $250,000 per truck. If you're going to use the existing compactor, I'm just giving you the average what that would be. I don't know if would be a difference in cost, but I'm sure it'll be about $200,000 per truck. And if you roll that out across the city, that can get very expensive, and that's where you get into the millions. There's also programs where we hope that the commercial establishments will build infrastructure in. Several years ago, we tried to lure, and we did a grant, just a proposal review to see if there were interested people in building a composting facility here in the city of Philadelphia. And we got 13 interested companies that was willing to do so. So there's certainly the interest for this type of system to be here, built in the city of Philadelphia. There's certainly a desire. There's a big challenge with the investment that it's going to take to build a citywide program, but I think we can certainly start small. There's some things that residents can do right now to start composting, just as you said. They can get a bin, they can start letting food waste in, they can let it biodegrade and actually use it as mulch in a garden. I remember a program that we had when we had the recycling program. We used to give grant dollars to schools, Philadelphia Green schools, And a school down in South Philadelphia actually took their lunchroom food waste and let it compost and biodegrade, and took an abandoned empty lot and built fresh vegetables and gave it back to the students at the school. That's just one example of, and they were school students that did this. So that's just one example of what we can do together affordably to be able to make changes in the amount of waste that we generate. And that waste didn't go into a landfill. It didn't go to a waste to energy facility. It went right back into the environment. I think those are some examples of ways that can be done. We need a plan to be able to implement it. And Scott and Phil, I think you guys worked on that, and Kyle, you guys worked on that as well. If you wanted to add a very brief comments to that, feel free to do so.
Yes, I would add our leaf and yard waste that we collect is composted. We work with Park and Rec. We use their facility in Fairmont Park. And Park and Rec, I'm sure they'll talk later about their pilot program they're actually doing with Bennett, which was set up initially to take care of food waste generated at their facilities. But they're longer term, they were looking at ways to expand that operation. I would also add the prisons has a composting facility. They compost a large portion of the food waste that's generated in their cafeterias, everything. It's actually a fairly sophisticated operation. They just got some additional grant money through the sustainability office to continue expanding that operation. So there's a lot of small scale stuff that's happening. But it's, as the commissioner said, it takes a lot of infrastructure dollars to develop this. We're working with waste management. That will also come at a premium. If we can get that off the ground, that will be a good push in the right direction. But we'll have to coordinate with the water department on this to use their digesters. And it will cost additional money to actually process the material. So either way you go, developing the composting infrastructure is going to take time and a significant amount of capital resources to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for bringing up composting, because I had questions as well around source reduction. And I wanted to put in a shameless plug for our Composting at Home program that will be on Wednesday, October 21st. From 1 to 2 p.m. With the Office of Sustainability and the School District of Philadelphia to teach our constituents how to compost at home. And also, Commissioner, you talked about the importance of our block captains, so I wanted to seize the moment to lift up the program offered by our council colleague, Council Member Curtis Jones, in the 12th Annual Virtual Block Captain Boot Camp. This year, they are going virtual as a result of COVID. And that program will be held on Saturday, October 24th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and it will be streamed live here on Channel 64. So I just wanted to note those two upcoming events for the record. I see in the chat that my colleague, Councilmember Brooks, would like to be recognized. And after that, I'll come back with just two more questions and then we'll move on to the next panel. Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Councilmember Bass actually asked some of the questions that I had, because one of them was about like currently what's happening with residence trash and recycling now. And I reflected on a time when my grandmother used to separate the garbage from the trash, which, you know, we call that composting, but back then the old folks didn't call it that. And I was wondering where's that now? So you kind of answered some of those questions. And I really just wanted to get on record as well. How can, you know, people know that that's something that they can still do and is available currently in these days? And I have some questions as well about illegal dumping. So what is the city's current procedure for disposing of large amounts of trash? I'm talking about not residential trash, but more like contractors' trash, for example. And how is that information shared? I had an illegal dumping situation, so I went through the trash to figure out where it was coming from, and I traced it back to a realtor that I ended up calling. And I know no one wants to rub rummage through trash, but it was excessive.
Mhm.
Like every week, as soon as we get paid to get it cleaned up, it was dumped again.
Right.
So what is the current procedure for contractors' trash? And do they have guidelines that they know about?
Yeah, so they're required to have a private hauler, number one, and to dispose of their material, and they have also a recycling plan to take any type of recyclable material that's not permitted in the landfill and have it recycled, like drywall, for example. Those things that should be actually recycled and not put into a landfill. There was legislation actually being placed on the books, and I'm not sure if it was implemented or we're about to implement it, or it's active now and we're in the process of setting it up, but requiring them to list their hauler on their permit. And that is huge because it then makes sure that there's a designated location and a point of contact when we're able to trace a contractor, and we can address the contractor's license if they're illegal dumping. And I think that's a big step towards addressing contractors. I think the challenge is that you have some of the mom and pop contractors who don't get a permit, and those are the ones that you may see doing dumping because they don't want to pay the $300-400 dumping disposal fee to get a dumpster properly paged. They would rather try to dump it in front of a property, like you just said, to have you pay clean it up. And that's the ones that we have to enforce with the police department and to have them address. So not only are they getting their proper permits, but they're disposing of their material properly. So I think that's a key step for us to be able to implement and enforce those rules and regulations to catch those type of contractors that do that type of business.
And what kind of enforcement is available currently? So once I found the address and I could trace it back to the realtor whose property it belonged to, what would be the next steps? Who do you report it to? Like, how do you follow that process out?
One of the very good things that the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet did, it was to establish the environmental crimes detective in the police department. And so they're dedicated to the city of Philadelphia to address issues that you just mentioned, Councilmember Brooks. You would give that information to that detective and he would actually start an investigation, just like the police would actually start a crime, because it is a crime. Depending on the magnitude, the penalty for it is up to $5,000 fine. And if it's a vehicle used, you can confiscate the vehicle or whatever equipment that was used in the act of why that dumping occurred. The challenge is evidence. Certainly, this is why we are a big proponent of cameras, because if we could catch you on video, we certainly think that that's sufficient evidence to bring in front of a judge, because that detective still has to give it to a prosecutor in the district attorney's office who has to take it in front of a judge to rule whether or not the person was guilty or not. So it can be cumbersome. It certainly can be challenging, but that is the process to start. And then we can actually start the enforcement process against someone who dumped in our city.
Thank you. Another question is about, like, have we looked into, like, being able to pinpoint the reason? I mean, it sounds like ridiculous, but the reasons people are dumping,
Not at all. That's sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, you wasn't.
Like, as a means to help with enforcement, like, have we been able to, like, why they're doing this? Like, what are the things we can do to prohibit it? But I mean, in addition to enforcement, but like when we start talking about the root causes, like, are we doing anything to mitigate any of that?
Right. That's a great question, matter of fact, because behavioral patterns do exist in the city of Philadelphia as to what type of dumpers, who they are, where they come from, and what locations in the city that are most impacted by it. And that is, it's no secret or surprise that economically challenged communities are the ones hit hardest the most, where there's a lack of development in locations, and there's often a lot of unused vacant property and space, open space where it's easy for people to come in and dump in those locations. Certainly, when people dump in those locations, they come from all over, and from a geographic perspective. One of the things the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet did also was establish a behavioral committee to look at the impacts of litter and illegal dumping. And then in the outcomes of that was that in those areas, those distressed areas are more likely to get dumped on by outside contractors than any other place in the city of Philadelphia. To be able to track that is something that we have done through the Litter Index. And we want to make sure that we start, that's where all our cameras went, believe it or not, first. We looked at those areas and those neighborhoods where those were having the biggest challenges, God bless you, and we ultimately went out and put those cameras up. And we saw a huge reduction in illegal dumping. The problem is they may have skipped over, while those cameras only cover, we had to put 10 for, I'm gonna use the Logan Triangle off of the Roosevelt Boulevard, for example. I think we put like 10 or 15 cameras up in that location. And when I showed Los Angeles, I was very proud the other day, because we did have some bouts of it, but the change that had and that impact on the community was tremendous, because we used to go there every week and pick up tons and tons of material. And now we may pick up, a few bags that are dumped by some residents that shouldn't do it, but it's a whole big difference. I think those are studies that we need to continue and we need to monitor, and we need to start crafting legislation around making sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yes, and thank you for that, because I don't live far from the Logan Triangle, and now that traffic has been rerouted off the ramp from Cayuga, we go through the Logan Triangle to get on the expressway, and I've been seeing so much dumping, but I do see an immediate cleanup. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing around that. I have one other question around the temporary workers that were hired during COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about, is there a process to maybe potentially extend their work past COVID? And what is their pay scale compared to the permanent workers? And is it any potential for them to eventually be hired permanently by the city in your department?
Yes. So the temporary workers were a huge help in getting us out of this crisis, number one. And I want to acknowledge them for the hard work that they've done immediately. We put them right into action, and they made an immediate impact. They come from the existing civil service list. So that's the good news. So that means they're eligible for full-time employment when a position opens up. And normally, we get high turnover in the city of Philadelphia, and each year we may hire 50 to 100. Well, we have to go through 600 names in order to do that. And so many of the people there are likely to get hired for full-time employment. Their salary is currently the same level they get paid as an entry-level worker, which is approximately $37,000 a year, I believe. So their hourly rate is equivalent to the annual salary of a full-time employee. So after 6 months, we do have the capability to try to extend it, the program, depending on where we are with COVID. And if the tonnage levels continue, we'll have to look at our budget. The great thing is it's being offset by overtime. So the temporary workers is actually reducing the amount of overtime that we spend in the department, which is a win-win for us, because ultimately it's not cost prohibitive for us to keep them on, and we can keep this type of program going. So it's been nothing but a very positive impact to the city of Philadelphia, certainly helping us get out of the crisis that we was in over the summer.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for the work you've been doing. I've been doing several cleanups around the city, and you guys have showed up with supplies, been there immediately to clean up, and, I would just want to salute you for that work. The communities that we've been doing the cleanups in really appreciate it. And I just wanted to make sure I put on record that I appreciate all the work that the Sanitation Department is doing. And I have a few more questions about zero waste. What is the goal? What is the city's goal to get to that zero waste by 2035? And I want to know how it's going so far, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities that we see?
So, I'm going to ask Scott and Kyle to also jump in. I'll give a brief overview to tell you we had a plan to be able to get to zero waste by 2035, starting with implementation of a major organics processing program. That consists of about 30% of our current waste stream, which is a tremendous amount of tons. We collect, this year we're projected to collect 700,000 tons this year. So about 100 to 150,000 tons may be food waste and composting and yard waste. So in order for us to start on a goal towards zero waste, we have to have a robust composting program, an organics program, processing program to reduce the amount of material that we send to landfills and waste to energy facilities. Recycling, as Kyle talked about earlier, was the other component that we continue to run some type of modified recycling program in the midst of the new revised provisions with the Chinese sword and what's happening in China with the contamination rate. So I think that is another big challenge for us because they don't accept that material. I think the key is to open up domestic markets here in America that would allow us to now process material here as opposed to sending it overseas, which would allow us to actually reduce and create businesses right here in America. Those things are needed and for us to create the infrastructure for us to get to zero waste. At the beginning, the circular economy, I think Councilmember Richardson talked about, it's how we produce, create, and dispose of not only the products, but the wrappings and the areas that in which these things are created and then distributed. I think we need to start at the top. That is beyond, unfortunately, the streets department's control. We can advocate for it, but I think holistically, we need to look at how products are created in the first place in order for us to mitigate the use of our natural resources. Phil Brzee worked on that in the beginning. Scott McGrath and Kyle, that's certainly up your areas. If you wanted to add to Councilmember Brooks's question, feel free to do so.
Yes, the Curb Your Waste campaign is another key component of this, reducing the amount of waste, and especially with what we've seen from the impacts of COVID-19. And one of the reasons why we initiated this effort is controlling how much and how people are putting the trash out for collection. It really affects how we manage our system. The composting and targeting other parts of the waste stream, as I said earlier, will take some significant capital investments. But I think working with other departments, which some of those efforts have already started, and I think we're definitely going to continue working with Park and Rec and the Water Department on some of these initiatives. But it will take a little bit of time to sort of get things launched on some of these efforts. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on trying to get some of these efforts going and everything. So as we go through the year, into the coming year, we're going to keep at it. The work that we've charged MSW Consultants to do is also going to help us. We're going to take a really close look at at the composition of our waste and see what portions of it we can either target through waste reduction efforts, what portions of it do we need to target with other recovery efforts, and taking also a real close deep dive on looking at the composition of the organics fraction of the waste stream. And that will really make a big difference in terms of how waste management can process the material and recover that portion of the waste stream. So that's going to be a real key. They actually reached out to me in the middle of our crisis and said, hey, let's get the discussion going again on the organics pilot and everything. So they're all in still on trying to help us come up with a solution to this. So it's going to take it's going to take multiple different types of efforts to get us to the zero waste. Another part of this is the commercial waste stream, which right now is really hard to tackle because the commercial waste collection system has been significantly disrupted by COVID because so many businesses just aren't operating right now, which is offices aren't open, restaurants aren't fully operating, which is a big reason why we're getting a lot of the trash because everybody is home. The school district isn't open, so all that trash is being generated for us to try to manage. So the commercial sector will be another big impact on this. One of the things that was started under the cabinet was an effort to recognize and reward businesses that have adopted zero waste practices. And that's something that we can get back to working with the Sustainability Office.
I have a quick point of information regarding the reference to the circular economy model. How are you thinking about how the results of the study you are conducting could be used in partnership with other city departments to really encourage a circular economy model in Philadelphia? And then I'll circle right back to my colleague, Councilmember Brooks, but I wanted to bring that up since you mentioned that.
Yeah. Phil, you worked a lot on that. Can you comment on, how we plan on using the data to help us drive this initiative?
Sure. The work that we're going to be tasked with doing and that we've already started is really going to be looking at the department's operations and programs and services. I think the portions that will be helpful for this larger circular economy discussion that's going to be more tied in with the waste characterization work that we're going to be doing starting in November, and then carrying on working with the partnership and things like that into early next year. So if I could, though, for just a quick second, just point out or remind that recycling is the ultimate. Recycling is acted upon locally but impacted globally. And Commissioner Williams mentioned China's national sword, which has now been in place for about 2.5 years, and the import restrictions that were enacted by that nation, and that's had a ripple effect for programs all across the country. So it's not just Philadelphia that has experienced the negative impacts of national sword. And I'd also just want to point out that recycling in many ways is very similar to what kind of maybe the state of the overall manufacturing economy in the U.S. And so we've lost a lot of domestic recycling processing capacity. We've lost a lot of end market capacity. That all went away as we began to export more materials overseas. So I do think that the positive is that there is a significant amount of investment now that has been restarted in domestic processing capacity in the U.S. And I think that it's still going to take a couple of years for it to all come online. But I do think that that's really going to help, I think, reinvigorate a lot of programs and get a lot of programs around the country back on track as far as reaching higher recovery levels and diversion goals.
Yes,
so I'm not going to answer the question. So sorry, though. Thanks for the opportunity.
I just want to add one thing, if I may. Thank you. With regard to the audits that are coming up, we're not only looking at the recycling stream to see what people are putting in that's wrong in the recycling stream and getting them to recycle right. We're also looking at the waste stream to see how much of their waste is not only organics, but is also recyclable materials, so that we can then encourage greater participation in recycling, so that we can get more of that recycling material out of the trash can and into the recycling bin. I do think, though, and I do want to say that when we're looking at the overall hierarchy of zero waste, and we're looking at source reduction and reuse and recycling and composting, and then there is the landfill component and just simple disposal, waste to energy, we are really hitting on all of those categories of the hierarchy in order to achieve zero waste. When we're looking at messaging zero waste, though, I really think we need to look at that in any city, but particularly in the city of Philadelphia, where we have 40% of our residents are living under the federal poverty level, is my understanding, where we have not necessarily a college-educated populace. When we look at the term zero waste and you throw that out to the average citizen, it's a term that on its face value is very daunting, right? To say zero waste means that you've really produced no waste, and we know internal to the process that's not what the term means. But I think we really need to look at messaging that term to the general population, because when you throw out the term zero waste to many, it sounds so daunting that people don't necessarily want to try to attempt it at all, right? And so I think we have to look at that when we are messaging to our residents. We have to really look at breaking down those particular categories of zero waste that are source reduction, that is recycling, that is composting, breaking down those categories, because when we put it under that big umbrella, it can be very obscure and or daunting for some.
Great. And I'll circle back. Thank you for your response. I want to circle back to Councilmember Brooks so you can finish up your line of questioning so that we can move on to the next panel. I don't see anyone else that wants to be recognized in the chat feature.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. That concludes my line of questioning. Sounds so formal. That concludes my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. And again, thank you so much, Commissioner Williams, Mr. McGrath, Ms. Lewis, and Mr. Breezy. Did I get that right? Thank you so much for your testimony and for your response and for all the work that you continue to do. We look forward to continuing to work with you and supporting the work of your department. So thank you very, very much. We will now move on to panel 2. Ms. Alford, if you could call panel 2.
Emily Yates, Ashima Sukhdev, and Alex Danovich.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So Emily, you can proceed with your testimony.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Gilmore Richardson and members of the committee. My name is Emily Yates, and I'm the Smart City Director for the City of Philadelphia at the Office of Innovation and Technology. I am extremely happy to be here to testify and share my knowledge around the circular economy, the Smart City PHL roadmap and programming, and opportunities for scalable solutions as a potential solution to street litter and waste disposal systems in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic here in Philadelphia. In my position, I am responsible for implementing the Smart City PHL roadmap, which was launched in February 2019 with an executive order from Mayor Kenny. The roadmap is intended to serve as an initial guide to spur innovation and collaboration in city government around the application of policies and technologies that make Philadelphia a smart city. I would like to extend a special thank you to Councilman Derek Green for his support in the launch of the Smart City PHL strategy and his continued participation in the advisory committee meetings. As defined in the roadmap, a smart city is a city that uses integrated information and communication technology to support the economic, social, and environmental goals of its community. As we continue to move forward with the implementation of projects and programs, that definition has shifted from a focus on technology and data to more of a focus on a human-centered approach and fostering economic growth and improving the quality of life through the efficient use of both existing and new resources. One of the key areas of focus over the past year has been developing and launching the Pitch and Pilot program, which provides a clear and transparent process for establishing a pipeline for partnerships. We leverage the Pitch and Pilot Working Group, which is composed of individuals from both the Advisory Committee and the Internal Working Group, to solicit ideas that reflect both the Kenny administration priorities and community needs and interests. Call for a solution is then issued, we review proposals, host a pitch event, and then select a promising idea, and the Smart City team will work to secure a contract with the solution provider and manage and track the implementation of that pilot. We feel this is an extremely valuable program because it allows us to support our colleagues by providing additional capacity and absorbing some of the risk that comes with piloting innovation and technology. Our first call for solutions is quite applicable to the topic of today's hearing, so I'm going to share a bit about that with you. The Pitch and Pilot Working Group determined that we would issue a call for tech and data-enabled solutions that support the city's zero waste by 2035 plan and target. This topic was determined for a variety of reasons, but largely because it addressed a top citizen concern. As we know, litter and waste has consistently been identified on the city's annual Philadelphia resident survey, and it addressed a key challenge experienced by the city regarding illegal dumping. The call for solutions was launched on December 16th, 2019, and responses were received by January 16th, 2020. And the working group selected 2 solution providers. One is Retriever, which Kyle mentioned. They collect e-waste and textiles, and Metabolic was the other finalist. Both of whom support the transition to a more circular state in cities. I'm going to briefly dive into that specific pilot because it was a project that laid the foundation for growing a circular construction and demolition economy here in Philadelphia. A circular economy, just to make sure everybody is aware of the definition of that, is defined by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as a framework for an economy that is restorative and regenerative by design. So looking beyond the current take, make, and waste extractive industrial model, a circular economy aims to redefine growth, focusing on positive society-wide benefits, and is underpinned by digital strategies. Metabolic proposed implementing and adapting an urban mining tool to Philadelphia's construction and demolition waste stream. Urban mining is very simply defined as mining for resources in cities rather than using virgin materials. So what do we have already in the city that we can utilize? The urban mining tool helps facilitate a circular approach to construction by evaluating the value and opportunity to reuse materials and elements embedded in existing buildings. These materials include precious metals and minerals, but also elements such as window frames, ceiling tiles, and doors. These can then be mapped against upcoming building needs to help develop the most efficient logistical supply chains. This tool provides the city and the community with data-driven insight into the demand and supply of material streams for years to come and how we, as a city, can ensure high-quality reuse. These insights can then be further used to encourage the construction and demolition sector to reduce waste and minimize demand for new construction materials. From this pilot, we know that there's a greater amount of C&D waste resulting from small-scale project demolition in North Philadelphia than anywhere else in the city, that there are a great number of construction projects and associated demand for construction materials in downtown Philadelphia, and the 5 highest materials in our waste stream are concrete, limestone, bricks, steel and iron, and wood. We know that construction is critical to the healthy functioning of our economy, but we also know that it is one of the biggest consumers of energy and raw materials. It is also one of the contributors to the issues of illegal dumping here in Philadelphia, as we heard in the prior panel. So how do we balance this economic driver with our climate goals? Reducing our reliance on scarce resources increases our economic resilience, and building a circular economy offers a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity in the U.S. alone by avoiding waste, making businesses more efficient, and creating new employment opportunities. In Philadelphia, there are already seeds that have been planted, like the urban mining tool and the composting pilot Ms. Knapp will reference, that are low-hanging fruits that we can and should take advantage of to help foster a more circular, equitable, and resilient economy and environment here in Philadelphia. Policies and programs that aim to minimize waste and consumption across all sectors while incentivizing innovative solutions for building a circular economy and creating more jobs are critical to Philadelphia, reaching both its climate and economic resiliency goals. I'm grateful to Councilmember Gilmore Richardson for convening this hearing to explore new ideas and strategies. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'll allow this panel to testify, and then we'll do questions at the end of this panel. So we'll recognize Mrs. Shima Sukhdev. Please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gilmore Richardson and members of the committee. My name is Ashima Sukhdev, and I lead the Governments and Cities program at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a nonprofit that develops and promotes the idea of a circular economy. We work with and seek to inspire businesses, academia, policymakers, and institutions. I'm here to share my knowledge around the topic of circular economy today. The circular economy, as Emily indicated, seeks to move from a linear take, make, dispose economy to one where we actually eliminate the idea of waste in the long term. It's really a fundamental rethink of the way that we make, use, and manage materials, products, and infrastructure in our economy. From a repair cafe that helps you fix your phone to a more durably designed t-shirt, a building that's designed for disassembly, or packaging that's made out of mushrooms instead of plastics. These are all examples of what makes up the circular economy. Over the last decade, the idea has gained significant traction with businesses, cities, and policymakers alike because it's an opportunity for the economy, for people, and the environment. So what benefits can a circular economy bring to cities specifically? Analysis has been conducted by Accenture that has estimated that transitioning to a circular economy could generate $4.5 trillion worth of additional economic output by 2030. When it comes to jobs, circular economy-related activities such as repairing, upgrading, remanufacturing are all much more labor-intensive than the alternative of just throwing things away. For example, refurbishing 1,000 tons of electronics can create 13 times more jobs than recycling that same amount of electronics. Recycling a ton of solid waste will pay $100 more in wages than disposing of it in landfill. Analysis conducted has shown that circular economy activity could create 12,000 net new jobs in London by 2036 and more than 11,000 jobs in New York City by 2030. The circular economy is also critical in our fight against climate change. So 45% of carbon emissions come from how we actually make and use products and how we produce food, which is where the circular economy solutions can come in. Cities around the world so far have started to take notice, with cities like New York, Charlotte, Austin, Phoenix, Toronto just being some of the North American cities that are pioneering circular economy initiatives, along with many other global cities around the world that we work with. And importantly, many of the businesses that we're working with, whether that's the IKEAs, Googles, Walmarts, Amazons, they are increasingly looking to pilot circular economy projects and initiatives and partner with city governments specifically. This is a unique moment for Philadelphia to take on the circular economy and drive forward an innovative, thriving local economy while respecting and regenerating our environment. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and I'm happy to answer any questions when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And lastly, for this panel, we will hear from Alex Danovich. Alex, please proceed with your testimony, and then we'll address questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Gilmore Richardson and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on our growing waste crisis, a problem that's been exacerbated by the impacts of COVID-19 has had on both our supply chain and the human health of essential workers and city residents. We're experiencing the repercussions of an unjust and broken model of waste that lacks accountability and transparency and is rooted in the belief that waste is inevitable, resulting in historic disproportional investments in disposal over reuse and recycling. As a social entrepreneur with 20 years experience developing zero waste infrastructure, I believe that all waste is preventable, not inevitable. Demonstrating this belief is the mission of Eureka Recycling, a nonprofit recycler in Minnesota I co-founded in 2001 that operates a similar size facility to what the city of Philadelphia would need for their recycling. By choosing a contract with Eureka, a mission-aligned business that is invested in the success of recycling, not beholden to the profits from waste, the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul have enjoyed a resilient recycling program that sustains 110 living wage jobs, has leveraged over $20 million in private investments, and keeps material local, sorting the recycling collected for its highest and best use. Eureka is just one example of how local self-resilience allows for cities to realize significant social and environmental benefits at a competitive price, even through our current crisis. The move from corporate-driven profit to mission-aligned partners is a key to achieving success. This will only happen if the city transforms their procurement process to attract the needed partners through incentives such as long-term contracts, provisions of buildings or space through public-private partnerships, and the valuing of economic development and environmental benefits of proposals over the short-term gains of lowest cost bidders. Ultimately, we need to move beyond recycling and change the systems that perpetuate waste in the first place through the development of sustainable, local supply chains that include refillable and reusable infrastructure. I can imagine a day when new social enterprises enable Philadelphia residents to get items from their favorite restaurants and grocery stores in reusable to-go packaging that's systematically collected from households, hygienically cleaned, and redistributed to retailers and manufacturers. And this is an issue that's been made particularly relevant as we've seen the increase in disposable to-go packaging and limits on voluntary bring-your-own actions due to COVID, as well as the legislative limits created by the state preemption. I've included a link to a recent report by Gaia in the written testimony, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss further, and I really thank you for your time and attention to the issue.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. I will start off with my questions for Emily. The Urban Mining Report offers a lot of recommendations. So have you been able to have conversations between the city and private sector stakeholders? And if so, what insights did you learn? And if not, is there a plan to host that conversation soon?
Thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. We have not had conversations yet. We've been doing a bit of the groundwork and trying to identify who the key stakeholders would be and also coordinate with existing efforts that are happening through the Sustainability Office's participation in the Thriving Cities Initiative.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. Also, the report offers some ideas of what the city could do after a few pilot projects, including using our procurement process to create sufficient demand for building reuse. How long do you anticipate that timeline will be? Or could this be an area of opportunity to help us jumpstart our post-COVID economy?
Thank you for that question as well. I'm not sure about the timeline, to be completely clear. That's something to look into, but I absolutely think that the procurement mechanism that the city possesses and utilizes is a great opportunity for us to have an impact on jumpstarting our COVID recovery. And it's something that beyond construction and demolition should be looked at as how we can incorporate circular principles into our procurement process. And I would love to look into that more.
Okay, and could you just please get back to us relative to the timeline, because that would be most helpful. And my last question, the Commerce Department is also working on a project to diversify the tech industry. So do you see room for collaboration between those types of projects and the circular economy work? And do you have ideas on how we can start building circular economy priorities into our business development and business attraction efforts here in the city?
So I absolutely see opportunity to align with the efforts that the Commerce Department is having, and I've been connected specifically in the workforce efforts that they're trying to identify. So I have a conversation teed up with Shilpa out of the workforce office to talk further about that, because there's just a massive amount of opportunity within the circular economy space to create jobs, but also to drive innovation. And I think the use of technology, circular economy is underpinned by digital strategies. So it's really inherent that we start to explore that as a hub, I guess, here in Philadelphia. I think there's a great amount of opportunity given the academia that we have in this space and the ability to collaborate with the high school programs around career and technical education and really work to create that pipeline of talent, because it starts from design to consumption. And we really need to look at the whole systems approach to it. How do we start to create that pipeline, but also retain and attract the talent? And that's something that through the Smart City strategy, I'm definitely looking into. Part of our pitch and pilot program, I spoke about one side. If you look at the image in the Smart City strategy, there's a second side that's looking at kind of solidifying relationships with key partners, mostly research institutions, but I also see opportunities to collaborate with different companies here in the city to help drive it.
Thank you so much for that response, because I really believe that focusing on career and technical education and workforce development will be a way for us to really help our residents as we move through COVID-19. So thank you so much for that. And I'm pleased to hear that you have been speaking with Shilpa. I think she's going to be a great partner for us on the workforce development front. I'd like to recognize my colleague, Councilmember Derek Green, for questions, and then I'll come back for the additional questions I have for our other witnesses.
Following in the spirit of my colleague, Councilmember Kendra Brooks, I will have a line of inquiry that's quite formal and direct. No, just joking. But I'm sorry, I was chairing another committee at the same time, so I was trying to listen to both the commentary from this hearing as well as participate in Cities of Inclusion initiative I'm doing in reference to making the city of Philadelphia the world's premier city of inclusion for those that have a physical learning difference by 2026. But one of the questions I have for this panel, and listening to all the panelists speak and testify, wanted to get some perspective on, and you talked about workforce and opportunities for training for young people who are in our high schools, but I also want to think about entrepreneurship opportunities and how we expose people to this circular economy. When, as Emily, as you were talking, and some of the other panels were also presenting their testimony, it made me think of a former coworker, Kevin Brooks, who, when I was in the law department, and I used to represent then called the Office of Housing and Community Development, Kevin was our EEO manager for that department. And because we do a lot of work in housing and development, he actually decided to start his own business, really salvage business, where he would go into demolition projects, especially of older homes or historic properties, and salvage some of the very unique and ornate parts of those homes, and then provide them for others. And he's been an entrepreneur ever since. He's done things on various cable channels, and various pilots from HGTV and others, providing some of the unique things that he's been able to salvage. But he, being an African-American man, saw this as an opportunity, and it made me think about this whole circular economy and how do we provide better inclusion and opportunities for entrepreneurs and really expose the potential entrepreneurship opportunities for businesses, so we can have more entrepreneurs like Kevin Brooks Salvage, who's been able to flourish and grow based on this type of circular economy.
I think that, thank you for your question, Councilmember Green. I think that's one of the great things that excites me about the circular economy is the opportunity for so many different individuals, regardless of their background, to have a place in the spectrum of what we need to do within the circular economy. And I wanted to mention this as a follow-up to Councilmember Gilmore Richardson's comment. I think one of the great things about circular economy is it's not only for people who have college degrees and, kind of the white collar role. It's also an opportunity to hire a lot of individuals that are underskilled, need reskilling, are hard to employ, unemployed. And so if you look along the process of designing, using, and kind of collecting, there's so many different points where we can create jobs. And great examples to point to, there's, for lack of a better example on the top of my head, there's a waste recovery process happening in Amsterdam. They have a former waste to energy facility that they realized that was not the most effective way to utilize these resources, was to burn them. So they've pivoted to become a resource recovery facility where they are collecting waste and employing individuals that are underskilled or hard to employ and using them to separate out that waste into reusable parts that keeps them at their highest value. And that's just a simple way of pivoting a business to create really a lot more job opportunities. But then there's also the space to create these hubs for entrepreneurs. And actually, prior to my role here in Philadelphia, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I led the development of their circular Charlotte strategy. And one of the things that we focused on was creating an innovation hub that provided low-cost space to entrepreneurs to allow them more of an effort into the entrepreneurial space, so kind of reduce that cost barrier, and provide them with access to those resources. And it didn't matter if it was access to avocado peels or coffee grinds to grow mushrooms or concrete. It was a space where we could connect and facilitate that as a city to help really drive the circular economy and that innovation and entrepreneurial space for all people. And part of what motivated me so much in developing that strategy is the city manager said, I want somebody who's currently collecting waste for the city of Charlotte who could potentially be homeless, because the waste manager hired individuals that were homeless to help. And in 5 years, I want to see him in this space with his own business. And that's the trajectory I want this space to create. And I think we have that capacity here in Philadelphia as well.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, because I do know an entrepreneur that I met that is doing e-waste. And he has returning citizens, and he has contracts for various commercial office spaces in our city where he collects the e-waste on behalf of the building owner from the tenants. Has been able to grow his entrepreneurship and his business, and as well as hire additional returning citizens.
Thank you.
One thing to that question as well. I'm sorry.
Yes, please identify yourself for the record and then please proceed.
Sure, I'm Alex Danovich. And I'm actually, so to speak to the job creation, I really love what Emily was saying. And as well as, I think I'm working with a new nonprofit in the city of Philadelphia right now called All Together Now Pennsylvania. And it's founder is Judy Wicks, who has a lot of experience connecting with the sustainability issues. And what we're really trying to do is take this opportunity, and COVID's really shown it to us, that supply chains need to be smaller. We're seeing now more direct purchasing from manufacturers to consumers, or from farms direct to manufacturers. And I think that lower supply chain for our basic goods, or the shorter supply chain, creates a tremendous opportunity for circularity and to create these entrepreneurship opportunities in the city as a job creation and job development tool. To really make our look at our local supply chains and make them sustainable, and do it in a way that's circular, especially with packaging and the issues that material doesn't have to go that far anymore. It creates a lot of exciting, I think, places we can go.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback and for that excellent work. Councilmember Green, did you have any additional questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Quickly recognize Green Building United. Are you still on the line, Green Building United? I think that was Amy. Okay, Amy had to go. So we are going to move forward. I have additional questions that I just wanted to get on the record for the MacArthur Foundation around your experience around some of the main barriers that cities are facing when trying to create a local circular economy, and what are some of the best practices that you've seen cities looking to incentivize a circular economy? And lastly, how have you seen cities pivot in the wake of COVID-19 to start to implement some of these programs? And I have additional questions for you, Alex. I'll quickly put them on the record after we're finished with Ashima, and then we'll move on to the next panel, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we'll ask the next panel to please keep your testimony limited so that we can get to the rest of the witnesses. We still have about 18 more individuals to go. So Ashima.
Sure. Thank you very much, Council Member. So in terms of your question around challenges and best practices, I think some of the challenges are certainly around awareness building and capacity building of what is the circular economy and how can my specific city actually adopt this concept. It sounds like Philadelphia is already looking to explore that, which is fantastic. There's also certainly barriers around collaboration. The circular economy is not something that just the city can implement. It will take businesses, small and large. It will take universities. It will take the sort of larger society to take part in. So really making sure that this is a collaborative effort. I think those are some of the challenges that we're seeing cities facing. In terms of best practices, I would say that a lot of cities start obviously with a waste characterization study, as you're doing, which is fantastic. I think it's really important to do some kind of landscape analysis of what circular economy activity is already ongoing in your city. You might be surprised that there's a lot of small businesses, entrepreneurs that are kind of catching on to this idea. So understanding who they are, understanding the large corporations that might be working on this as well, and then kind of convening them together. I think that's sort of a great starting point for a lot of the cities we work with. And then another just point of best practice, I would say, is that this is in all the cities we work with, this is a cross-departmental issue. It's linked to climate, it's linked to food security, it's linked to resilience, it's linked to workforce development. So making sure there's some kind of cross-city advisory board or group that can work on the circular economy. So it's not just a single department that's trying to chip away at it, because it will have a lot of different stakeholders. And then to your second question quickly on how COVID has perhaps impacted some of these efforts. Obviously, in the short term, a lot of cities are facing similar challenges, just as Philadelphia is, with recycling programs and composting and so on. But a lot of them have very quickly realized that the circular economy is a long-term solution to some of these immediate challenges that they've been facing. So their mayors or deputy mayors have recommitted to the circular economy. They kind of thinking about it much more in the long term. So I'd say it's certainly something that initially sort of people had to put a pause on some of their efforts, but in the longer term, they recognize that they have to take on the circular economy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that feedback. And Alex, very quickly, I just wanted to ask you, what best practices can we take away from the work that you've done in Minneapolis?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I think, as I was saying in my testimony, I think there's a lot of best practices that can be implemented in terms of the RFP process and your procurement process that could help build these local opportunities for local businesses and more community accountable businesses to be part of even your recycling program. I think there's some great examples already in the city with composting and Bennett. But the more I think you can move into mission-aligned partners to help the city do this work, the more you're not going to be fighting against the fact that oftentimes disposal is more profitable, right? So that's going to shape the decisions of these contractors. So if you have a contractor that's really invested in the same outcomes in terms of circularity, workforce development, and community accountability, I think that's a really great starting place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback. And I want to thank you, Emily and Ashima, for your testimony and just for all the knowledge you bring to this area. I'm taking copious notes, but I will be reviewing the transcript of the hearing after this hearing. So thank you very, very much. We will now move on to panel number 3. Ms. Alford, if you could call panel number 3.
Christine Knapp and Tim Bennett.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alford. Ms. Knapp, if you could proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Gilmore Richardson and members of the committee. I'm Christine Knapp. I'm the Director of Philadelphia's Office of Sustainability. I'm here to offer testimony on Resolution 200431 to investigate the challenges and solutions to litter and waste disposal in the wake of COVID-19. I think most of you are familiar with the Office of Sustainability as being responsible for implementing Greenworks, the city's sustainability framework. So I won't talk too much about our office. The office was a key partner in launching the city's Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet several years ago. And zero waste efforts have also now been consolidated into our office, providing us with more opportunity to make connections between waste and some of our other sustainability priorities. Since releasing the 2017 Zero Waste and Litter Action Plan and setting the zero waste goal, the city has implemented many strategies to engage stakeholders in minimizing waste across all sectors, including waste from our own municipal operations, from commercial entities and institutions. The city's Zero Waste and Litter initiatives prioritize preventing waste before it is created. Through programs like the Municipal Building Waste Audit and the Zero Waste Partnership Program, municipal agencies and commercial partners are provided with technical assistance to improve their waste management practices and help us advance towards a lower waste future. One of our primary strategies is minimizing Philadelphia's overall waste generation is to pilot and expand innovative strategies to reduce wasted food. Experts say that as much as 40% of all food is wasted. So at a time when many of our residents are food insecure, we know we have to do better. Wasting food also means that we're wasting the water and energy used to grow, transport, and refrigerate that food. And wasting it also results in methane emissions once it's in a landfill. Over the next several years, the city will be pursuing several projects to tackle food waste. We received a technical assistance grant from the Natural Resources Defense Council, known as NRDC, as part of their Food Matters project, that expansion into the Mid-Atlantic region. We'll be collaborating with 4 other regional cities to pilot strategies to tackle food waste. We're also the recipient of a grant issued by the United States Department of Agriculture, which will bolster Philadelphia Parks and Recreation's community composting network to expand composting capacity in neighborhoods, and to support a food service business challenge, which will provide technical assistance to businesses to implement food waste reduction strategies. As I referenced earlier, our Greenworks Sustainability also supported the Department of Prison, a composting facility at the Holmesburg Prison, which has not only helped to reduce waste costs, but has also provided training for the inmates in sustainable land use care. This fall, Parks and Recreation will launch the first ever urban composting permit pilot project. The city-owned pilot site will be operated by a private contractor who will collect compost from rec centers citywide free of charge in exchange for rent and utilities. It's the first of its kind in Pennsylvania, and the permit is being developed in partnership with the state DEP with the intention of lowering the barrier to entry to operate a public or private composting facility in the city. These projects will all lay the groundwork for several long-term waste management, food waste management programs in Philadelphia, and will enable the city to tackle food waste using a variety of strategies that will reduce emissions, lower municipal waste costs, and relieve community food insecurity. Other city-led strategies include piloting and expanding circular economy projects. Circular economy strategies eliminate waste through the continual use of resources and create sustainable systems for managing materials locally. They can also be a key part of economic development and job creation. We are currently working with the C40 Cities and Circle Economy as a pilot city for the Thriving Cities Initiative, a multi-year program to plan for and pilot anti-consumption initiatives with stakeholders inside and outside of city government and to expand circular economy efforts. As noted earlier, we partnered with the Office of Innovation and Technology on their pitch and pilot program. And through that program, 2 companies, Metabolic and Retriever, are now piloting strategies for minimizing waste and promoting circular material management in Philadelphia. In closing, policies and programs that aim to minimize waste across all sectors and incentivize innovative solutions for building a local circular economy are vital for us reaching our zero waste and for reaching our climate goals. I'm grateful to you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, for convening this hearing to explore these ideas and strategies, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine, for your testimony and for all of your work with the Office of Sustainability and just in this arena in general. It's been my pleasure to work with you over the years, even back to the energy benchmarking legislation, the original iteration of that bill. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your work. I'm going to allow the rest of the panelists for this panel to testify, and then we will address questions. We have testimony that has been submitted from Commissioner Catherine Ott-Lovell from the Department of Parks and Recreation. And now I'll recognize Mr. Bennett for your testimony, and then we will move into a quick line of questioning so that we can move to panel 4 and then hear from the individuals who'd like to give additional comment for this hearing. Thank you so much. Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson and all the other council members present. Thanks for allowing me to testify today on Resolution 200431. 11 years ago, I started Bennett Compost with $100 and desire to make composting simple. Today, we collect food waste curbside from over 4,500 households throughout Philadelphia, keeping over 2 million pounds of food waste out of landfills and saving the city over $65,000 annually in landfill fees alone. We employ 11 full-time and 4 part-time individuals who all make a minimum of $18 an hour and offer benefits including health, dental, and a matching 401k retirement program. We have multiple employees with experience going through the criminal justice system and have worked with the Philadelphia Prison Composting Program at Holmesburg Prison to provide opportunities for returning citizens. Composting is a tool to modernize waste collection, fight climate change, mitigate food injustice, and an economic development strategy. We are beginning a public-private partnership, which Christine Knapp talked about, with the city to convert an old city maintenance facility in Longcrest to a state-of-the-art urban composting facility. Once this facility is fully operational, it will keep 1 million pounds of food waste out of landfills, saving the city $32,000 in landfill fees while reducing harmful methane emissions. It will produce 500 yards of finished compost that can be used by gardeners and urban farmers to grow healthy foods in areas that don't currently have access to it, and support 10 full-time living wage jobs. More importantly, it sets up a model that can be replicated throughout the city with support from council in terms of identifying appropriate parcels of land and retrofitting them and creating systems that are open for composting. This model can handle large amounts of the city's residential food waste, create numerous entrepreneurial opportunities for Philadelphia-based businesses, not multinational corporations, and provide living wage jobs with benefits. I look forward to your questions, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Bennett, and for that inspiring story, starting with $100, right? Thank you so much for your innovation. Quickly wanted to circle back to our Director of the Office of Sustainability. Had two very quick questions for you. How can council better support your office to implement some of those strategies and pilot programs that you mentioned?
Well, as there are pilots, I think we do want to test them out and see where we hit barriers and where there's resource needs. So I think through both the USDA and the NRDC projects, we may very well come back to council in a year from now and say, this is what we've learned through these projects. Here's where we think there's opportunities. So I would sort of stay tuned on those fronts. And I think Commissioner Williams already sort of talked about some of the challenges for the large scale sort of implementation in terms of the resources needed there, especially given the budget constraints at the moment. So I think, the approaches that we're collectively taking to help make composting and other strategies possible where they're possible. So the community network, I think, is a great way to start engaging folks in their own neighborhoods about compost, how it works, what you can do, and sort of socializing the concept will be a stepping stone so that when we're able to do more and bring it to a larger scale, we'll have a baseline of understanding. We saw that happen in DC. They also had a community scale composting network that we actually went and toured and learned from that we're kind of replicating this on. And we saw a very strong increase in understanding among residents about how to compost after that program was launched. So I think, building on success, building on these pilots over time is one of our goals.
Thank you so much, and we'll definitely stay tuned and look forward to the feedback and the updates on how we can better support the work of your office. What are other ways you think we could work towards helping residents and business owners around composting? I mentioned earlier that we're having a composting at home program through a partnership with your office. So what do you think are some other ways that we could work to really help our residents and also business owners to start the process of composting?
I know that we've heard from some restaurant and food service industry representatives in the past that they would like some sort of financial incentive to, do the right thing. But my response to them at the time, and what I would like to remind folks, is we do have the Sustainable Business Tax Credit that is available for businesses, and sustainable management of food waste would certainly qualify a business to be able to be eligible to apply for and receive that already existing tax credit. So I think primarily what we need to do is promote the Sustainable Business Tax Credit, make sure the businesses know that it exists, that they are eligible for it, and how to apply for it, because we usually honestly do not get enough applications. It's capped at 75. We don't usually get 75 businesses that apply. So there's plenty of room for more businesses to get in there and take advantage of that. And since we know, businesses are always looking at their bottom line, especially at this moment when, so many folks are struggling, that is an opportunity for them to if they're going to spend any additional dollars to do better sort of organic waste management, here's a way for them to offset those costs.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that feedback and for all of your work. I wanted to move on to a question that I have for Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, what changes have you seen in your business in the wake of COVID-19?
So we've seen kind of two noticeable changes since COVID-19 started. And the first is that we've seen a fairly substantial reduction in the commercial food waste that we handle, and which makes sense, right? Restaurants are shut down. Places that serve food are shut down. Even when they're open, they're doing a lot less business. They have a lot less food waste. They're looking for ways to cut back. What we have seen, and so that has been discouraging, but what has been very encouraging is that while we have seen fairly strong growth over the past few years, once COVID-19 hit and we saw an even bigger increase in people who are interested in home composting. And so whether that was composting through the service that we offer, whether that was reaching out to us to figure out how to do home composting, they were able, whether that was looking for community gardens, there just has been a large increase in people's awareness of their food waste and a desire to do something different with it than what they're currently doing. And I think that some of the challenges that COVID-19 presented for trash collection throughout the city were also inspiration for people to start to think differently. Because, right, when everything's working well, people don't think about it. But when things don't work well is when people start to think that there could be a better way to do something.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense based on the current environment we're in, particularly around the restaurants and the commercial businesses. It makes a lot of sense. So thank you for verifying that for us. Thank you all so much for your testimony. I'm checking the chat to ensure that none of my colleagues have questions. Seeing none, we're going to move on to panel 4. I'm going to ask all the remaining panelists to please keep your remarks short. If you can keep it to 2 minutes, that will be helpful so we can get to any questions that we may have. From here, we have 3 panelists for panel 4, and then I'm seeing at least 12 individuals who want to give public comments. So we want to get through this as quickly as possible so we can respect your time and get to as many individuals as possible. So thank you so much in advance for your cooperation. Ms. Alford, if you could call panel number 4.
Maurice Sampson and Mike Ewall. Unfortunately, Amy Cornelius had to leave us.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Alford, and thank you, Councilmember Green, for being here for the hearing. We truly appreciate all of the work that you have done in this space, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. And I'm so happy that you are a member of this committee. So thank you so much for being here. We do understand that you must depart for another commitment. We'll now move on to panel number 4. Maurice Sampson, please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. Maurice, we can't hear you. Please unmute. Maurice, we cannot hear you. Please unmute. Maurice, we still cannot hear you. So we'll move on to Mr. Ewall, and then we'll circle back to you, Maurice, to give you an opportunity to check your technology. Okay. Mr. Ewall, please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, my name is Mike Ewall. I'm with the Energy Justice Network, a national group based in Philadelphia. The city's waste plan currently is called a zero waste and litter plan, but it does not follow the official definition of zero waste or the zero waste hierarchy as outlined by the Zero Waste International Alliance. We would recommend that happen. The city's current waste plan depends on burning a lot of our waste that we don't otherwise reduce or reuse or recycle. But zero waste is defined to mean zero incineration and minimizing the amount of waste to landfills. We've studied this, and in Pennsylvania, we found that the incinerators in our region are 80% worse for global warming than the landfills and 60% worse for other pollutants. In a broader study of incinerators versus landfills, we found they're worse for global warming and emissions of particulate matter, acid gases, toxic chemicals, smog, and nitrogen oxides that trigger asthma attacks. The city's plan also leaves out the most effective and cost-effective way of quickly reducing waste, which is unit pricing or paying per bag or per bin, which over 10,000 communities do. And when they do, they find pretty much immediate reduction on average of 44% of the waste. About half of that is reduced not just by moving things to recycling bins, but by people reducing and reusing so that the city doesn't even have a collection cost. And if we add composting to that, it can get diversion rates up to 70%. We must move away from burning our trash. It's an environmental racism problem, a health problem, an asthma and cancer problem, which are huge in Philadelphia. And we need to support the Waste Contracting for Clean Air Act that one of your committees that I'm involved in put together and brought to you to end the city's burning of our trash and recyclables as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony and also for your work on the subcommittees. Know that we truly appreciate your work, and we are looking through those proposals with a fine-tooth comb, and we just appreciate you and all the work that we will be able to offer from this committee because of your commitment. So I just want you to know, from me to you, thank you so very, very much, because we truly appreciate it. I do have a question for you, but we're going to go back to Maurice Sampson to recognize him for testimony. Maurice, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Can you hear me now?
Excellent. We can hear you now. Excellent.
Very good. Well, good afternoon, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson and the members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am the Eastern Pennsylvania Director for Clean Water Action based here in Philadelphia. COVID-19 has revealed the underlying issues in Philadelphia's ability to properly manage its waste. Those issues are systemic. They're compounded by a 75-year history of poorly informed policy decisions, which aren't going to be blamed by blame or replacement of personnel, which I bring up in response to an article I was interviewed in. Under the circumstances, I really want to recognize the Streets Commissioner, Carlton Williams, his staff, and the collection crews, because I think they're doing the best that they can be expected to do, given the current solid waste management policy and the resources that are available. Philadelphia's waste management system is broken, and it continues to decline. When I just look, for instance, at the statistics in Mayor Kinney's annual 5-year financial and strategic plans over the past 4 years, there's actually been a 7% increase in the volume of waste collected. In fact, the recycling rate has actually dropped from 20.5% to 14%. And every year, we're putting out 44 to 88,000 citations, contacts, and warnings that suggest that there's some issue with our education efforts. Pre-COVID, on-time waste collections have been average and the equivalent of about a day behind, while recycling connections are 96 or better. There are no short-term fixes to the current circumstances. Zero waste goal of 90% by 2035 has to achieve an average increase of 4.3% a year to meet its objective. Since the zero waste goal was set, we're actually decreasing by 2% a year. Zero waste is achievable, but it's going to require a commitment by the administration to fundamental reform of waste management practices based on a comprehensive, sustainable solid waste management plan with scheduled implementation and commensurate investment. Now, there is good news. In cities that have made similar investments, they have actually reduced their operating costs 20 to 40% while adding food waste collection. If we fail to take these steps, our costs are going to continue to rise, and we can expect experiences as we are under COVID-19 right now to continue beyond the pandemic as part of a recurring waste management crisis that this city actually has experienced for at least the last 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony, Maurice, and thank you for all of your work and for being a part of our subcommittees and just for always being someone that we can rely on and count on for your expertise. I've worked with you as a staffer in council when I clerked the Committee on Environment and now as a member of Philadelphia City Council, and I want you to know that I truly appreciate you and all the knowledge that you bring to this space and how you have helped us to move the needle forward in so many ways. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for the record, and thank you so very much for your testimony and continued work. I wanted to move back to Mike for a very quick question around what you think we can do here in Philadelphia. So based on your experience with other cities, what best practices do you think Philadelphia can adopt to move our zero waste goals forward?
Sure. So the first thing would be recognizing that our contracts that we have for trash collection right now have minimum amounts of waste that we're required to generate and give to Covanta and Waste Management for disposal. So one of the first things we need to do is when the contracts come up for renewal in 3 years is to not renew them for any of the next 1 year options. There are three 1 year renewal options, and to start new contracts that use zero waste principles and have them in mind. So understand that the back end means that we need to not use incinerators, but do certain things to pre-process waste before it goes to a landfill. And incinerator is a way of pre-processing by spreading into the air most of it, but sending ash to a landfill makes it even worse. But there are better practices on the back end that can be done that will make the landfills less of a nuisance at the same time that we do all the upstream things like I mentioned before, like pay as you throw, also called unit pricing, the composting collection, deconstruction mandate, I would say, on the construction and demolition waste side is also a key component because that's a huge portion of the waste stream, can create many jobs, dismantling buildings instead of taking wrecking balls to them. So those are just three of the big building blocks of zero waste. Of course, there are many more, and we're happy to work with your office now.
Thank you. And that was some very concrete recommendations that I think we can really employ, particularly as we look at that next contract process. So thank you very much for those recommendations. Same question to you, Maurice Sampson.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one of the things we need to do as we look around at other cities is to look at what we have already done. We had an Office of Recycling with 23 members of staff that actually had civil service positions written to all of them. And they were literally eliminated in the first 10 years of this decade. One of the people on those staff was an economics person on the staff that looked at this. And that was Nancy Weissman, who was in that role. And one of the things she used to do, buy recycle was a big deal. She actually trained the procurement department to write procurement specs to increase the buying of recycled content products. And we won awards 3 years in a row for that program. We held a program at the convention center where we brought all of the buyers in from the city and invited people who had products to sell to just show them what they could purchase. And it was huge. Nancy used to do a report every year where she would go out and she would track how many new businesses were coming into the city. And it was the fastest growing sector of business in Philadelphia were those businesses. The other thing she used to do was she used to steer business people away from coming to the city. Because unfortunately, when they came, they would always be sent to the streets department, which is not an economic development agency. And she would interview them to understand, well, why are you coming here? And the number one thing they would say is, because of the city's policy, which in the 90s was early, really recycling didn't happen any big way until the early 2000s, every place else. We actually had what was considered the best planning unit in the country. And when Los Angeles and San Francisco first hired, they actually came to Philly to see how we were doing our planning. All that has sort of been lost in the way. But we have a lot of things that we have already done. And I think the speaker who said we need to look and see what's going on in the city is important. The other thing that we do not do, in fact, that we actively resist, is partnering with the private sector to understand how these things get done. Recycling began, and I came here from New Jersey, and the first 20 people hired to do this for municipalities in the country. It was actually in New Jersey. And we were trained by industry. It was not the environmentalists. The industries at the time wanted to figure out how they could get recycled materials to go back into their products. Because at the time, it was the energy crisis was the big thing. And they learned that when you use recycled materials, you need a lot less energy to recover them. So they made a deal with us. They said, if we could show them how we could bring out materials that were clean into their specs, they would buy them. And we were against mandatory in those days. Mandatory came about because it was recognized as a way to deal with waste. We were really about building business and creating industry around the materials that were in the waste stream. You might say we had the right mentality in the beginning and we got diverted into looking at it as trash. And we have to turn that around. Right now, we basically treat recycling as trash. And I'm not being critical here. The Sanitation Department's job is to get the trash off the streets. And that is their first orientation in everything that they do. Unfortunately, what that means is when there is a crisis, we're just looking to get it off the street and we're going to put the recycling aside in order to get rid of the trash. We need what we had once upon a time, which was a separate office that dealt with just recycling planning. Sanitation did the collection, but the planning was a separate unit. It was even separate of the streets department. And it had a more orientation that was similar to the way the zero waste cabinet is set up, in that the director worked with all the various agencies. But it was a whole orientation that looked at, these are commodities. We've got to pull materials out to meet the specifications of the marketplace. That is the answer to the China problem. We have to create materials that industry wants, not just divert materials from the trash. And we need more of a partnership where there is an orientation that looks at recycling as a business function, as a function that's trying to create resources for industry. We need to actively work on bringing in new markets to the area. In the beginning, when I started, we didn't have any markets, China or the United States. And we had to go out and we had to coax all of those in order to make them happen. That's kind of where we are again right now. And we're at sort of a new beginning. I've had a strange sense of deja vu through this whole hearing. The terms are different, the descriptions are different, but we did all of this. We did all of this 30 years ago, and we're now doing it again. So we need to not see it as new, and we need to try and dig up and look at some of the things that we have done that work because they're applicable here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that feedback, Mr. Sampson. And I think it's true. You know, we were a leader in this area, and that's what we need to be now. So thank you very much for your feedback. Council support, we are going to move on to the next panel. So we need to ensure that all of the witnesses that were sent are logged on to the hearing. So thank you all so much for your testimony, Mike and Maurice, and for hanging in there with us. We are moving on to our next panel. So I'll give you all an opportunity to load up the next set of witnesses. Do we need to take a short break?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we will take a very short break to load up our next set of witnesses who will all give public comment. Thank you all so much. To have our witnesses log on to the hearing. I'll ask Ms. Alford if you could call the list of panelists, and then I will recognize them one at a time.
Sure. Meenal Raval, Logan Weldy, Morgan Berman, Jim Blanchett, Tracy Confer, Lynn Robinson, Bridget Powell, Lisa Hastings, Elisa Shagorotsky, Peg Shaw, Erica Berman, Amber Cook, Peter Winslow, and Queen Judith Robinson.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alford. I will recognize Meenal Raval. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yeah, hello. My name is Meenal Raval. I'm a resident of East Mount Airy and a volunteer leader with Sierra Club Southeastern PA Group. I wanted to comment that our streets department has doggedly tried keeping up with curbside collection. Let me mute the music, please. And we agree, it's been harder than ever this year. Residential curbside collection, though, is just one part of our waste stream. There is commercial waste, construction and demolition waste, illegal dumping and street litter, none of which is picked up by the trash trucks, and all of which could be handled better. So I think it's time for us to rethink waste. We need to think like nature, where there is no waste, where the waste of one group is eyed as a resource by another group. Humans have been part of this cycle for centuries until we introduce plastics. Plastics and their complex chemicals end up in our waterways or get incinerated. It's bad either way. So to rethink waste in our city, like Maurice Sampson just said, we need to loop in planners and educators that think like nature, that think from a zero waste perspective. The work will need many other city departments, such as the planning department, the commerce department, the water department, and others. We also talked about more local jobs when we were zero waste tax instead of our business as usual have. We can begin by implementing the long-awaited ban on single-use plastic bags. New York State's bag ban was questioned during the pandemic-induced panic this spring, but their ban has survived the pandemic, and so should ours. An example of redesign in the zero waste hierarchy is the toothbrush I've wielded each day for over 15 years. Although it's a plastic toothbrush, I only need to change the bristles when needed, holding on to the same handle for all these years. That's 99% less plastic to throw out. Zero waste means never buying something you'll use just once. I personally would like us to replicate the concept of a free store in each neighborhood. There are so many items thrown out that are perfectly fine and reusable by someone else. For a local example, I look to the Media Free Store in Media, Pennsylvania, set up at a donated storefront with volunteer labor. Zero waste means never throwing an item that you've outgrown and still functional. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minal, for your testimony. And I just wanted to thank you for being a part of these subcommittees as a part of the Committee on Environment. Thank you very much for your testimony, for your work, and for your feedback. Logan Weldy, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman. Logan Weldy, Clean Air Council. I'm also a committee member and a block captain. I've been a block captain since 2013. I did provide written testimony with a number of examples of legislation that will help with the litter and waste problem, and as you know, also on the subcommittee. I don't know how many council members are still on, but I want you all to just reimagine, as Minal just stated, what trash and waste and litter is. It's not just items that need to be picked up and disposed of, but it's a real cost to the soul of the city. Litter adds to crime, depression, and poverty, and our neighborhoods are overburdened by litter, and it's crushing their soul. Yes, it is a financial burden. The city spends an estimated $48 million per year on trash and litter. There's even a bigger cost than money. Recent study in JAMA concluded that living in or near trashed and littered neighborhoods can have substantial negative health consequences. According to that report, neighborhoods that were cleaned and greened saw a 63% decrease in self-reported mental health issues, a 29% decrease in gun violence, an increase in property values, and an increase in business investment. The average American produces over 4 pounds of trash per day, and I assume COVID has exacerbated this. The fact is we've changed the way we've lived, and municipalities have been asked to take on that burden. Neighborhoods get most of the things now delivered to their homes, especially during COVID, and all of those things are individually packaged. And for some reason, it's become the city's responsibility to deal with this, unloading that cost from companies like Amazon and Grubhub and other services that bring all these things into our communities. We're also inundating the planet with plastic. It's showing up everywhere and in our bodies. In fact, we now eat as much as a credit card's worth of plastic per week. I want everyone to just imagine for a second that throughout Philadelphia, all the fire hydrants are just turned on. It would be crazy to go ask the water department to build more pipes or to increase the number of storm drains. What you would do, and what would be logical, is to simply turn off those fire hydrants. We've got to think the same way about trash and litter this way. We've got to stop these things from coming into our communities. There is no reason why these things need to keep on coming in when so many of them are superfluous. We've got to pass legislation. Councilman Green has a bill that I gave him probably about 2 years ago to stop circulars and phone books from coming in to the city, and we'd like to see that introduced. Recycling is done. It's not the answer. The virgin plastic is way too cheap. Recycling cannot compete anywhere in this world with that. We shouldn't return to a normal path of collection, as Carlton Williams said. We should change that curve because that curve is going to keep on going higher. We've got to support the block captain system, as a number of people have pointed out, and we'll speak to later today. The block captains are really the people who know their neighborhoods the best and can communicate the information from the city the most effectively. Unfortunately, too many people who care about the city, like me and others, are becoming disillusioned. It's just too littered. It's too trashed. And there are cleaner places to live, and some of those people are going to start moving. Councilwoman Bass asked about outside-the-box ideas. There are plenty, and none of those include keeping the amount of litter that we have and just trying to landfill it all. It really comes down to stopping the amount of trash that's coming into the city. Thanks a lot.
Logan, thank you so much for your testimony and for all of your work and for also being a member of our subcommittees. We truly appreciate all the ideas that you bring to the table, so thank you for your work. Morgan Berman, please proceed with your testimony. Pardon me.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Morgan, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, please proceed with your testimony. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Morgan Berman. I'm a resident in South Philadelphia, and I'm also the president of my civic association, Dickinson Square West. I'm on the board of the Energy Coordinating Agency and Philly Startup Leaders, and also the Philadelphia chapter of Alma Links, which is an international entrepreneurship association. I moved back to Philadelphia and eventually earned my Master's of Science in Sustainable Design because of my passion for solving our greatest challenges and opportunities, which are, I think, climate change and social equity. 7 years ago, I took my passion and experience in marketing and design, and I built my Philadelphia-based software company, Milk Crate. At Milk Crate, we build affordable mobile apps to help civic and nonprofit programs engage and communicate with participants and track their impact. In our work, I've had the pleasure of partnering with the Free Library, the Committee of 70, the Cultural Alliance, Philly Youth Sports Collaborative, and many others, where we're building apps that guide users to volunteer, give back, learn, vote, visit cultural sites, and more. We've helped dozens of local and national organizations mobilize and track these kinds of programs. We're even launching an app for Rabbit Recycling, a local startup that picks up waste from residents for a small fee and keeps the items out of landfills. From my work, I've learned a great deal about what it takes to engage a large group of people and point them towards a collective goal, especially a social impact goal like reducing litter. This is why my colleagues and I worked closely over the last 2 years with City Council and others at the Streets Department to build a plan to launch an app that would engage, motivate, and track residents to pick up trash, with the goal to eventually build a full sustainability spectrum of activities users can earn money for completing in their neighborhood, like getting trees planted, signing up for composting, getting out the vote, and more. Unfortunately, after months of radio silence and a stalled contract after we were put in the budget for last year, the pandemic hit and with it new excuses to not move forward. As of our last communication with the Streets Department, we were actually asked to provide our services for free. This is certainly not an appropriate request of a small local business with employees to pay. We're ready to get to work, and we have full confidence that we can launch an innovative and impactful solution, as we've done numerous times over the last 7 years. But it will require the Streets Department's leadership to take a leap and try something new that focuses on engaging our residents and utilizing modern technology solutions like ours. I hope that the other testimony today motivates and inspires you all, the decision makers here, that it's time to try something new, something that has been applied in similar contexts with great results at a much reduced price than what you're currently implementing or what has already had to be canceled. And that it looks to our residents not as a problem, but as a solution to litter and all the other sustainability issues plaguing our city. Thank you.
Morgan, thank you so much for all of your work in the Philadelphia community. And I remember meeting you a couple of years ago. So I just want to say thank you. And I hope that your little person is doing well. So we're going to move on to Jim Blanchett. Please proceed with your testimony.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name's Jim Blanchet. I'm a committee person in Point Breeze. I'm also a clean technology professional, and I'm an advisor to Milk Crate. So you just heard from Morgan, who's the CEO of Milk Crate. I'm going to try not to repeat much of what she said. I'm also not going to touch on waste collection, source reduction. Those are things that are not my field. I'm going to talk about technology and engagement. When we talk about litter, we talk a lot about sources, infrastructure, education, and those are valuable discussions. But the program that we were all ready to launch for the city as a pilot looks at it through positive engagement of residents. I think everybody knows that outside the Center City Business District, where private contractors are paid to clean up litter every day, litter is just a fact of life. Logan mentioned the disenfranchisement. That is a very real thing here. These are just to list a couple of things we've tried in the past to address street litter: adding public trash cans and trash compactors, marketing campaigns, mailers, postcards, etc., handing out recycling bins with lids, a street sweeping pilot, a web platform that lets me see how late my trash collection is. Those things have those solutions have some very important things in common. They're expensive, they're time consuming, or both, and more importantly, they haven't worked. I don't think we'd be talking about this if they hadn't worked. When we talk about programs and tools that we're using, I think there's a very important question we need to ask, which is, who is actually going to sign up to participate? We can spend tons of time and money on solutions that appeal to people who have already bought in, the people that are on this phone call, the amazing block captains, the great volunteers, people who pick up litter every single day. But the litter index has gone up, not down, meaning we see more, not less street litter. And that's not because strategies that are being implemented aren't well designed and planned. It's because they are providing more and more resources to the same group of people who've already decided that they care and have already opted in. Everybody else is disenfranchised, or worse, they're apathetic. And you don't change that by offering more tools and programs to the same people. You don't change that by doing the same thing over and over again. You have to do something drastically different. So the Streets Commissioner mentioned Up PHL. I'm going to talk about that real quick since we work in tech. Councilmember Bass mentioned that she didn't know about it, and I think that's a great point. First of all, it's not an app. It is very important to distinguish that it is not a mobile app. It's a web platform that I can use on a browser on my phone if I'm comfortable with that. But I missed it too. When he talked about it, I looked it up. We work in tech, Morgan and I, and we missed it. And that's not a problem of marketing or education. That's a problem with the program design. If there's no reason for me to be interested in logging into a platform because I'm already apathetic, I'm not going to go log into that platform. I applaud any efforts to leverage tech to try and solve this issue because we work in tech, we love tech. But before we go around patting ourselves on the back for building tools and doing things in-house and saving money, I would ask the members of the committee to ask yourselves and ask the people who are building this tech for you a couple of very important questions. How many active users are on the tech? Not visits or web traffic. How many active users? What time of day are they using the platform? How does adoption change over time? Where are the users of the app or any technology? Are they in the neighborhoods that are most negatively impacted by litter? And what KPIs or measurements are you using to gauge the value of that app? And if you see them trending down, what levers can you pull to make adjustments? If those are questions that you can't answer, that's a very, very serious problem. Living in the pandemic means we have lots more people living at home now, and a lot of those people are out of work now. When the city's budget and resources are constrained by COVID, spending time and effort and money building tools and launching programs that are not directly designed to incentivize and engage people who are currently not helping to address this problem is very problematic. Time that we spend doing that, building more tools for the same people, is time that's wasted right now. I would really ask that you think about this as a time to engage local tech companies to help you think differently about this problem. Let us help you crowdsource litter prevention and address litter, and we can bring more people into this discussion that have never been there before. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your testimony and for those concrete questions. We really, really appreciate that feedback. Tracy Confer, please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Tracy Confer. I'm in Northeast Philadelphia. Thank you for hosting such informative panels. I have 4 brief points before my testimony. One is that when a local sanitation convenience center cannot accept yard waste, as Ashburner could not last time I took a carload, it would be good if Fairmount Park composting site did not charge residents a $15 minimum fee to drop off. Second point is about Up PHL. It shows where trucks have been, but it would be much more valuable if it could forecast when recycling would be picked up versus being put in trash trucks so that people know whether or not to put out their recycling. Third, having paper in the recycling bins is a problem. Single stream recycling reduces the value of paper and cardboard. And when it rains, paper gets wet, clogs up the sorting machinery. So in future recycling contracts, it would be better to have paper separate from other collections. It doesn't become waste until it's mixed and contaminated with other things. If it's kept separate, it's more of a commodity. Fourth, we've got a long-term opportunity to recruit businesses to the former refinery site. So I would encourage everyone to be thinking along those lines. And most of my comments are about burning versus zero waste. Trash incineration is the most polluting way to manage waste or to make energy. It's dirtier than burning coal. It's worse than landfilling directly. When trash is burned, 70% of it ends up in the air as air pollution. 30% becomes toxic ash. It still goes to a landfill. And the 6 counties around Philadelphia, we have 5 trash incinerators around the city, are among the top 10 air polluters in this region. And the incinerator that Philly uses most in the city of Chester is the largest in the nation with the fewest pollution controls and is the #1 air polluter in the Philly area. So I strongly encourage not renewing a contract for waste that would go to a burner. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for those 4 points of feedback. I was taking copious notes. Thank you very much. Lynn Robinson, one of our subcommittee members, please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. Lynn?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please proceed with your testimony.
Okay, my name is Lynn Robinson. I want to thank you, Catherine Gilmore Richardson, and the committee for taking my comments, which are limited to a small box of waste disposal today. I'm a retired Philadelphia school teacher, director of Neighbors Against the Gas Plants, and an active member on the Air Quality and Energy Advisory subgroups. Okay, the Philadelphia Streets Department has a strained relationship with the public because people don't know or are appalled to know what ultimately has been happening to our trash and recycling. It's evident that the single stream recycling system isn't working and that we need to establish other methods to reuse materials and compost food waste. But the most appalling thing is to find out that we're breathing in a significant percentage of the trash, which is burned downwind in Chester. And this matters more since COVID began because we're tossing away more throwaway packaging, burning it, and then breathing in carcinogenic plastic and styrofoam. Last year, City Council allowed the Streets Department to sign up for 4 to 7 more years of trash incineration with Covanta, which is the nation's largest incineration company. Council was petitioned to not do this in a letter that was signed by a wide range of 41, mostly city-based organizations, but also including the 3 community groups that live next to the incinerators and landfills that we use to dispose of our waste. It's noteworthy that the Teamsters Union in Baltimore has come out in support of closing incinerators because they know that air pollution hurts their workers and that recycling and composting create more jobs that they'd like to organize. On the other side of the coin, there's organizations who favor incineration, but they're funded by Covanta. For example, the Center for American Progress, which has been receiving $50,000 to $100,000 a year, and the Chester Environmental Partnership, which receives $30,000 in donations a year from Covanta. So in conclusion to all that, we have to move away from burning our trash and recyclables as soon as possible and pass the Waste Contracting for Clean Air Act that we just submitted to you about 10 days ago. When I say we're burning our recyclables, it's because, unfortunately, sometimes the recyclables are ending up in the trash. Especially since COVID began, people have watched their recycling thrown into trash trucks and felt betrayed. And there hasn't been any kind of a plan coming from the Streets Department that's communicated to the public that this will stop happening unpredictably and forever. So anyway, the other thing is that people still don't know that contaminating their recycling. The containers, for one thing, don't have any printing on them that lists what's okay and what's not okay to put in. And the Streets Department in general doesn't communicate effectively with the public. So they recently sent out a postcard, and postcards are great, but this one had a title that said, 10 tips to curb your waste. Well, right there, they lost most of the people because it dumped 10 paragraphs of tasks on readers. But the most aggregating part of the 10 tasks or 10 tips was the one about recycling. It was number 7, which was not a priority, and it was incomplete. It left out which types of plastic to recycle. It didn't mention that plastic bags are prohibited with any kind of explanation as to why. So lots of people are tossing in plastic bags in their recycling bins, and they don't understand that it clogs up the sorting machines. Also, intuitively, people know that when it rains, like Tracy said, the paper and cardboard is wet, and we really don't trust that it's going to be recycled. But in conclusion, we need to pass the Waste Contracting for Clean Air Act. We need to begin a two-way conversation or communication between the Streets Department and the public And we need to change our recycling methods. We need more effective systems, as Logan put it, to turn the fire hydrants off, and as Mino put it, change the brush on the toothbrush handle and not throw away the whole thing. So thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your feedback, and particularly around the postcard and point number 7. I just made a notation here. So thank you very, very much for your testimony. We will now proceed with testimony from Bridget Powell. Bridget, please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good evening. My name is Bridget Chow, and I want to thank you, Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson, for taking me to hear about my issues of litter. I've heard plenty of people talk, so I'm going to keep mine short and brief and try and touch on things that I have not heard. I have lived in West Philadelphia for over 40 years near 63rd and Market, and currently I'm a co-block captain. I'm part of the beautification committee, and I'm also a Girl Scout leader of 25 years. The biggest thing I see, and I would love, and I like the recycling part, but first we need to get the trash off the streets. And no matter how much we try, we clean the trash up. We just had our trash picked up at 63rd and Market. The trash will be back there tomorrow. We are trying our best, but I think we need some red cameras, just like we have red cameras for people who run red lights. We need red cameras because there are obviously contractors and people just dumping in our cities. Councilwoman Gauthier has been doing an excellent job in the last 2 weeks. We've been sending her pictures. She's been helping us get things cleaned up, and she's seen it herself. Within 2 days at 51st and Wyalusing, the trash is back there. What I would suggest is maybe in each council district, maybe having a dumpster so that people can put stuff in it. I'm not far from Upper Darby. Every Saturday morning, I see people out there cleaning up. I guess these are people who committed low crimes that are out here doing community service. If we can do some of those things, and I commend you for having, I guess, PHA, Philadelphia Horticultural Society, are now paying people and employing them so that they will have opportunities. But also as a park ranger, I used to work in the park, and I appreciate all the efforts, but we definitely need some red camera lights out here with some fines, because these signs that are underneath the L that talk about fining people, they put the trash right underneath the signs. So we need to do something different, and I think having a cleaner environment does help someone mentally. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you so much for your testimony and for all that you do within the West Philadelphia community. Thank you very, very much. We'll now hear from Lisa Hastings. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hastings. I'm a lifelong environmental scientist and planner, and I'm also working with the Air and Energy Subcommittee. To be brief, as a former environmental planner, I support moving ahead without further planning, truthfully, moving ahead with known program modifications and new legislation, just in order to take the action that we need to take without any further delay. New laws also can jumpstart vibrant plans, and unlike plans, they authorize action. I support the waste contracting for clean air bill that was discussed earlier. And I think it needs to be enacted soon so it can both be applied during the next contracting cycle and so that we don't continue to turn our municipal trash into pollution. On trash, briefly, I support compacting trash cans outside Center City, particularly nearby bus stops, in parks, and along corridors with lots of pedestrian traffic. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because I was getting crosstalk. Okay. We definitely need more compacting trash cans outside of Center City. Also, after listening to the testimony on the mission-driven contractors and the problems with recycling, I'm thinking that reuse and recycling might be areas where the city wants to rethink what they're doing, including the easily contaminated single-stream open containers, but where we might want to look for using mission-driven contractors instead of large corporate contractors that don't give us the flexibility that we need for our waste stream. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for your work and for your testimony and for being a member of our Air and Energy Subcommittee. We truly appreciate all of the feedback that we receive from you. Next, we will hear from Elisa Shargorowski. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Elisa Shargorowski, and thank you, Councilwoman Richardson, for just all of your attention and of all of the people who are here. I really appreciate you acknowledging all of the work that's happening here, even on this call, from Carlton to our community members. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I'd like to proceed by stating that I am a consultant. I work locally. I'm a zero waste consultant. I've been doing this for about 6 years here in Philadelphia. I'm actually Philly born and bred. I have 2 teenagers, and so this topic is very, very close to my heart, and I dedicate my whole life to this. One of my contracts right now is Weaver's Way Food Co-op. They are the oldest food co-op in Philadelphia with 10,000 member households, and we are actually, we do a lot of things to help our members to understand about this movement towards plastic reduction. And something that I want for everybody to acknowledge, and something that should be on the record, is that we're constantly talking about mitigation, and we're not having enough conversations about truly how to get on the ground with reduction. We have giant industries that are selling goods here, and everything in the grocery store, everything that we buy has a package associated with it. So when we're talking to residents and telling them that they should be mindful about zero waste, it's like those two things are not congruent with what we're doing at the market level. So what I'm doing with Weaver's Way currently is we are putting models into place, a system into place internally in the co-op to have a take-back, more deposit-like circular process where, so in the past few years, every year, Weaver's Way generates or sells 400,000 8-ounce plastic containers. So when we're thinking about this citywide, we're talking about just a local, tiny little co-op. Let's think about every store across the city. What's happening is that we have so many, this grab-and-go culture, convenience culture, that's what we need to be talking about. So what I am asking is that when we're having discussions about zero waste, we cannot have these discussions separate from commerce. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually moving into a new style of a service, member-based service here in Philadelphia, which will look to offer these circular options for food service establishments so that when we're doing takeout and we see these spikes in takeout because of COVID, we need a clear channel to create circularity for containers, for takeout containers right now. Like, we need to be having this discussion right now because there are so many containers being generated, and we could be bringing commerce into this conversation to have corridors where we are literally having containers, member-based programs where people are putting their takeout food in reusable containers and then using my service, my company ecosystems to clean these containers, to put these things into circulation. And so I just want for this to be on the record that we are here for that, and we're hoping that we can expand these into neighborhoods in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Elisa, thank you so much for your testimony. I think a lot of what you noted I've read in this report from the MacArthur Foundation. So I just want to thank you so much for your testimony and for your feedback, and particularly all your work with Weaver's Way, who has truly been a pioneer in the Northwest section of Philadelphia. And I wanted to note for the record that we appreciate the increased store hours that you all have implemented as a result of COVID-19. So thank you very, very much for your work and all that you do here. Peg Shaw, please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. And thank you so much for being a member of our subcommittees. We appreciate all of your feedback and your work. Peg?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for staying on this call for so long. And so good afternoon, Chairperson Gilmore Richardson and committee members, and thank you for this hearing. My name is Peg Shaw, and on behalf of Toxic Free Philly, I want to express our support for Resolution 200431. Environmental pollution is insidious. As we know, it is often invisible, and its impacts are often delayed and compounded with other exposure to toxins and stress. Environmental pollution causes chronic health disease that significantly erode quality of life and leads to early mortality. The disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on communities of color is in a large part due to environmental racism that exposes people to life-threatening pollution and subsequent chronic health conditions. When coupled with the climate crisis, the city must now do everything in its power to eliminate environmental pollution with forward-thinking solutions that build a just green economy. And I think this hearing today is a fantastic start. Toxic Free Philly urges the city to stop burning our trash and recycling. According to the PADEP, the greenhouse gas emissions from the 6 incinerators in the state are 80% higher than 17 landfills, though they collectively handle the same amount of waste. We urge Council to support the Waste Contracting for Clean Air Act, as previously mentioned, to end the city's burning of our trash and recyclables as soon as possible. As others have mentioned today, much of our city's waste is trucked to an incinerator in the city of Chester, where 75% of the population is African American. The Chester incinerator is the largest in the country and the #1 air polluter in our region. Between the asthma, strokes, heart attacks, and other diseases caused by incineration, we are literally killing ourselves and our neighbors with our own waste. So we must find a better way, and I hope that these hearings will lead us in that direction. As previously discussed, composting and our food and yard waste is one solution with multiple benefits. Climate impacting emissions from landfills can be drastically reduced by removing food and yard waste. This material could be redirected to community composting operations, and I want to thank Bennett Composting for leading the way locally. I take part personally in their services. This will not only save on disposal costs, but the outputs can support our growing urban farming initiatives and support the resiliency of our urban forest and native habitats. However, trash and plastics must first be removed from food and yard waste streams prior to composting or mulching, so we don't end up redistributing microtrash with our compost or mulch. This is currently an issue with the city's yard waste recycling center. So just in conclusion, composting our food and yard waste is a win-win-win solution. Toxic Free Philly supports the Committee on the Environment to hold hearings to find solutions towards zero waste. And I want to say thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, Peg, for your testimony and again for being a part of our subcommittees and also for mentioning the Chester incinerator. I think is not one of the best kept secrets that my husband is from Chester and is from the biggest family in Chester, and a lot of them suffer with asthma, as do my husband and my children. So thank you very much for mentioning the work that we need to do to reduce what's going down stream to Chester in that incinerator, and for all of your work. I look forward to continuing to work with you on our subcommittees. Next, we will hear from, thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Erica Berman. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, I'm Erica Berman. I'm a resident of Delaware County, and I work in downtown Chester. at the Historical Society. My family's from Chester, and I work about a half a mile away from Covanta Trash Incinerator. I'm currently organizing with Mike Ewald of Energy Justice Network and the Chester Residents Group that has been fighting the trash incinerator in Chester for nearly 30 years, a city experiencing one of the worst cases of environmental racism. I realize that a lot of these comments, a lot of great comments have already been made, so I just want to make a few extra points. I commend council for taking up this resolution to examine the challenges and opportunities of waste management in Philly. Right now, half of Philly's recycling is being burned in Chester and a large amount of the city's trash. Mike earlier covered the statistics on how incineration is much worse than landfilling. Waste stands at the intersection of climate change, racism, and health. Perhaps COVID-19 has given us a jump start to get on top of this issue. The residents of Chester are paying for Philly's and the region's trash problems with their lives. The health impacts from incinerator air pollution is clear. Philly needs to be a partner to Chester and not continue to utilize it as its dumping ground and a place for its soccer team bearing the city's name. Philly should divert its waste away from Chester towards better solutions like landfilling while aggressively educating and implementing zero waste programs. I appreciated the comment that was said earlier around messaging for zero waste, so it doesn't seem impossible to those unfamiliar with the term. While Philly figures out how to collect and remove its trash, Chester cannot escape this problem.
Excuse me, Erica, pardon me one moment. Just a quick point of concern. Whoever that is with the noise in the background, if they could go on mute so that we can hear Erica's testimony, please go on mute if you are not currently testifying. Thank you very much. Erica, please proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Philadelphia has one of the highest asthma and cancer rates in the nation, and we need to work together and innovate our systems to clean up our air by banning and burning it in our backyard. Plastic bans must not be pushed off. We need to stop brushing this problem under the rug. The rug is poisoning us, and we are putting ourselves at higher risk for viruses like COVID-19. It's time we stop continuing with status quo old habits and adopt to new innovative changes. The transition is challenging, but it's not impossible, and I support this resolution and thank this group for committing to examining waste management. There are other places in the world that are doing this, and I'm confident that together we can make some changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much for your testimony and for all of your work in the city of Chester. Thank you very, very much. We will now hear from Amber Cook. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, yes, my name is Amber Cook. I live in North Philadelphia. The trash and on my block, Hartville and Ontario, is bad. But in all north of Philadelphia, it's just out of control. And it's attracting rats. Rats are COVID carriers. The fiends, it attracts fiends because they come and dig through that trash. They just toss out their needles on top of the trash and into the pile, used needles. And I was really offended when a city council member said that we don't report it because it's a no snitching area. The cops don't come to our area because of trash. So that's fact. They just don't care. So maybe you all can help us by setting up some kinds of surveillance. There's 101 cameras around. I just, honest to God, don't know how the police or different people aren't seeing people dumping trash and really doing something about it. I understand that this is near K&A. We've got a serious drug problem. We've got a lot of crime, but that doesn't mean that my children have to be, see this and smell this and be part of that. A woman's child just got bit by a rat because that's how bad it is. And the trash usually takes a day or two ever since COVID. And we just feel like you all just don't care. And then to hear a city council member say that we don't report it because we're in a no snitching area, that's the furthest thing from the truth. And it's just, like I say, it's bad on my block, again, Hartville and Ontario, but in North Philadelphia, period. It's just bad. I'm pretty sure that people wouldn't even take their kids to St. Christopher's or to the McDonald Foundation if they knew what was behind the building, because that's how bad the trash is around here. Thank you.
First, I just wanted to thank you, Amber, for your testimony and say that we do care. That's the reason why we are having this hearing. We want to hear directly from you on how we can help to mitigate the issues that you are faced with in that community. And I wanted you to know that earlier this summer, I was in the exact area that you are referring to with a crew of sanitation workers to see firsthand a number of the challenges that they are faced with in that community. And I do understand what you were saying. And I'm going to ask my staff if you can work with council support, if we could follow up with you on some of those particular issues and with your district council person so that we can ensure we try to address some of those issues right away. But know that we do care. That's the reason why we are here and listening to this testimony so that we can review all of this so we can make a difference on behalf of you and all the individuals that we serve in our great city. So thank you for your testimony. I'm going to ask council support to please help you get connected to my team so that we can follow up. Thank you very, very much,
Okay.
Amber.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very, very much. Next, we will hear from Peter Winslow. If you can identify yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony. And Peter, I want to take a point of personal privilege to also thank you for being a part of our subcommittees with the Committee on Environment. We appreciate your work. So Peter, proceed with your testimony.
Oh, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Gilmore Richardson and members of the Committee on the Environment. My name is Peter Winslow. I'm a resident in the West Mount Airy neighborhood of Philadelphia. I'm speaking today on behalf of a smart collaboration, and I'm going to make it brief. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss challenges and solutions to street litter and waste disposal systems in the wake of the pandemic. Waste does not exist in nature. Waste is a construct of how human society has organized itself. The concept of waste is based in our economic system, specifically that our economic system ignores the biological, chemical, and physical reality that everything is interconnected. So when we produce products and find uses for their byproducts, whatever is left over is considered waste. Until waste is eliminated by its technological conversion to a byproduct, it will be considered an economic externality. And the cost of externalities are being paid disproportionately by our poor Black brothers and sisters through practices of environmental racism. The pandemic has exacerbated the underlying problems associated with sanitation. We're producing more household waste because we're housebound. Collection is impeded by increased illness in our workforce. But if we don't deal with the underlying problems that confronted us before the pandemic, we'll still need to solve them after this pandemic has passed. The pandemic is adversely and disparately impacting poor Black neighborhoods. COVID-19 is an airborne disease vector exacerbated by poor air quality, specifically the presence of particulate matter. Now that the PES refinery has been closed, the 3 trash incinerators surrounding Philadelphia, located in poor Black neighborhoods, emit the most particulate matter in our region, contributing to over $100 million in health costs to our region each year before the pandemic. These costs should not be considered externalities. Instead, these costs should be avoided by reusing, recycling, or composting. We urge City Council to introduce and pass the Waste Contracting for Clean Air Act to ban contract renewals to burn Philly's trash or recycling. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter, for your testimony and for your important feedback. We appreciate your work. Next, we will recognize Queen Judith Robinson. Queen Judith Robinson, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the resolution 200431. I am representing Susquehanna Cleanup Pickup today, our environmental education group located in the heart of North Philadelphia, where we're working on the issues of environmental justice daily, from these issues of litter, clean air, etc. And healthy communities are very important to us. It's unfortunate that we have our conditions with recycling now. And it really affected how our community handles recycling. We had really strongly encouraged our community to recycle, use our sanitation centers, and now that they learned that the recycling is being dumped with the trash, it has really cut down on a lot of recycling in our community. So enforcement of the area of short dumping and contractors' trash is very important. I know that laws were passed recently to increase the fines. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the areas of enforcement and increasing those fines. We need more sweep officers. There are several sanitation arms of like PHA, Temple University. I think there needs to be more coordination to get trash off our streets. We definitely need more sweep officers to go into our communities, such as North Philadelphia, and encourage our communities to stop the corner short dumping, bringing trash right outside of their homes, as though that makes sense. But when sanitation does pick it up at the corner, then they think it's okay to continue that process right after the sanitation trucks leave and start that process for it to pile up all the way to the next week. That was before COVID. Now with COVID, it's worse. So with more trash being produced as people are at home, I'm going to get off now. My phone sounds like it's about to die, so I've been waiting a while. But I just want to find out more about this subcommittee I keep hearing everyone talk about. I know in the urban community, environmental justice is not prominent, but I want to let you know we're up here working diligently in North Central Philadelphia. We did have a contract through PHS for a decade, cleaning, greening, and beautifying our community. But after 10 years, we have more trash than we did when we started. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Queen Judith Robinson. And I'll have my team follow up with you to give you a list of all the subcommittees that we have to see which ones you are interested in potentially joining. Thank you very much for your testimony. We will now move on to our last witness of the day, and I want to thank you very, very much for your patience. And I was very surprised to see your name on the list. We have someone here who has really been the driving force behind the Chester residents' concern for quality living and their goal to make sure that families in Chester live lives free from polluting industries. So it's my honor to recognize Zuleen Mayfield for testimony. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, my name is Zuleen Mayfield. I'm from Chester Residents Concern for Quality Living in Chester, PA. I want to thank you all for letting me speak truth to what is happening as a result of Philadelphia sending trash to Chester. My residents, my community, my family, we are suffering. We probably get about the bulk of the trash that goes into the incinerator in the city of Chester, which is the largest in the country. And the majority of that trash comes from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, which irks my soul. So I want members of council to understand that there are real ramifications for decisions that are made in Philadelphia, and they are impacting my community. We have the highest rates of asthma, highest incidence of low birth weight babies, cancer is spiking, heart disease, diabetes, and a lot of these things were attributed to the pollutants that come out of the stack at Covanta. So I just want to say that, you have to be aware of the decisions that you make and what communities these decisions impact and what is the impact. Because eventually, although we have the incinerator in the city of Chester, you will get blowback from the pollution that comes out of that stack back in Philadelphia. So there has to be more inventive ways of dealing with the trash. And it has to be a real concerted effort. It cannot be bottom line money, dollar versus dollars. You have to think about the cumulative impact that it has on my community and your community as well. Philadelphia has always been a sister city to Chester. And I think that we have paid the price for Philadelphia not becoming more inventive, more aware of what they're doing with their garbage and their recyclables. It has to be heard that it is impacting our city. We've appealed many, many times to ask you all to stop and to think about what you're doing and who it impacts. Well, it impacts me. It impacts my family. It impacts our children. Give our children a chance. And that is what I wanted to put on the record today. Philadelphia can find a better way of managing their trash. The alternative, the number one answer should not be, let's send it to the Covanta incinerator in the city of Chester. Why should we bear the burden of people's decisions in Chestnut Hill or in Roxborough, Manioc? Why should I have to worry about what's in the trash? The trucks that roll through my community, the trains that come through our community, and what's being burnt, and the pollutants that come out as a result of them burning. Arsenic, cadmium, lead, particulate matter. All of those things are impacting people's lives in Chester, the health of our community, which is incidentally is only about 4.9 miles long with 33,000 people in it. So that is what I wanted to say, put on the record today, that we will work with you. There has to be a better solution. What happens in Chester also happens in Philadelphia because there's no magic shield that keeps the pollutants in Chester. So that is my testimony for today. Whatever I can do that will help you make better decisions, I will be available for it. And that's my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining this hearing and for your testimony. And again, I'm going to ask my team to follow up with you so that we can receive additional feedback from you offline. So thank you very much for joining the hearing and for your testimony and all your advocacy work on behalf of the city of Chester. Is there anyone else?
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else here to testify on the resolution whose name has not yet been called? Hearing none, are there any other questions or comments from the members of the committee? All right, hearing none. I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We truly value your opinions and all the feedback that you shared with us. This concludes the business before the Committee on the Environment today. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Have a great evening.